What happens when the people who should love you most have abandoned you for good? Olivia's world was turned upside down at just 8 years old when her parents left without warning, choosing to leave her in the care of her grandmother. 10 years later, after growing up under Grandma Evelyn's care, Olivia had built a life for herself, one based on hard work, love, and trust. But when her parents returned, pretending to care, Olivia was faced with a choice: let them back in or finally put herself first. Stay tuned to see how Olivia handles the return of the ones who left her behind, and don't forget to subscribe for more. I was 8 years old when my world shattered. The evening was warm, with the kind of soft sunlight that bathed the sky in gentle pinks and oranges, painting the air with warmth. I remember sitting in the back seat, my small hands clutching my stuffed rabbit, as we drove down the familiar road to Grandma's house. I wasn't scared. I loved visiting her. She always had fresh cookies waiting, her hugs warm, filled with the scent of lavender and old books. But that night was different. As the car pulled into the driveway, my mother turned in her seat, her expression tight, like she was holding something back. "We just need some time to figure things out," she said softly, avoiding my eyes. "Be good for Grandma." That was it. No long explanation, no goodbye hugs, just those words, said too carefully, like she had rehearsed them 1,000 times. I nodded, too young to understand the gravity of what was happening, too trusting to believe anything other than what she told me. I climbed out of the car, my small backpack slung over my shoulder. Grandma was already at the front door, smiling warmly, but something in her eyes told me she knew exactly what was going on. She knelt down and pulled me into her arms, but I barely felt it. My parents' car was already backing out of the driveway. "Wait!" I shouted, my voice rising in panic. I stepped forward, expecting them to stop, expecting my mom to roll down the window and tell me it was a mistake. But they didn't. The car turned onto the road, and within seconds they were gone. I stood frozen, staring at the empty street, my heart pounding. They'll come back. They have to. This is just temporary. It has to be. That night, Grandma made my favorite dinner, trying to cheer me up, but I barely touched my food. She tucked me into bed, humming a lullaby, but the moment she turned off the light, I buried my face in my pillow and sobbed. The next day, I sat by the window waiting for their car to pull in. But it didn't. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And I kept waiting. Every day after school, I rushed to the window, my heart racing at the sound of an approaching engine, only for disappointment to settle deep in my chest when it wasn't them. Every night, I cried myself to sleep, whispering the same question into the darkness. Why wasn't I good enough? Grandma never let me get lost in those thoughts. She sat beside me, stroking my hair, her voice steady and warm. "Some people aren't ready to be parents, but that's not your fault." I wanted to believe her, but deep down, I knew the truth. They weren't just absent. They had chosen to leave. Life with Grandma Evelyn was nothing like what I had known before. She was sharp, sophisticated in a quiet, humble way, and disciplined, but with the warmest heart. She lived in a modest home, drove an old sedan that had more miles on it than I had memories, and still worked as a high school principal, even though she didn't need to. It wasn't until later that I realized how wealthy she truly was, but Grandma never cared for luxury. She believed in hard work, in education, and in always carrying yourself with dignity. She had a sharp mind for business, often reading financial newspapers with her morning coffee and casually mentioning investments I didn't understand at the time. Despite her success, she never let money define her. Under her care, I flourished. She encouraged my love for science, fueling my curiosity with books, experiments, and endless discussions about how the world worked. She hired tutors when I struggled, never letting me believe I was anything less than capable. Every night, she sat with me at the kitchen table, helping me through my toughest homework. She was never impatient, never condescending. "Knowledge is power, my sweet girl," she'd say with a knowing smile. "And you, my dear, are going to change the world." Hey, the first time I truly believed her was when I won first place at the state science fair. At 13, I had worked for months on my project, poring over research, testing, failing, and testing again. I didn't expect to win. Standing on that stage, hearing my name called felt surreal. I clutched my trophy with shaky hands, searching the crowd until I found her. Grandma Evelyn was standing at the back of the auditorium, beaming with pride, her hands clasped together. That night, she threw a huge party at home, inviting all my friends, my teachers, even her colleagues from work. The house was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of her famous homemade lasagna. "That's my girl," she had whispered as she hugged me tightly. "You've only just begun." And in that moment, I knew I didn't need to wait by the window anymore. I stopped thinking about my parents, stopped hoping they would come back, stopped caring why they left. I had Grandma, and she was more than enough. Years passed, and before I knew it, I was standing in a beautifully decorated restaurant celebrating my 18th birthday. Grandma had rented out her favorite spot in town, filling the space with my closest friends, teachers, and mentors. She gave a toast, her voice steady and full of pride, as she spoke about the young woman I had become. But it was after the party, when the guests had left, that she handed me the small velvet box. I opened it to find a delicate gold chain with a tiny key pendant. "This is more than just jewelry," she said, watching me closely. "One day you'll understand." I ran my fingers over the key, smooth edges, confused but touched. "Is it for something?" I asked, but she only smiled. "You'll know when the time comes." I didn't press her further. At the time, I had no idea that this would be our last celebration together, no idea that just 3 months later everything would change again. I never thought I'd lose her so soon. The call came in the middle of the afternoon. I had just finished a class project when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was one of my friends, but the moment I heard the voice on the other end, my world stopped. "Olivia, it's about your grandmother." By the time I reached the hospital, she was already gone. A heart attack, they said, quick and painless, but the pain I felt was anything but. It ripped through me, hollowing me out from the inside. One moment she had been there, my rock, my family, my entire world. The next, she was just gone. I moved through the next few days in a haze. Arrangements were made, people whispered condolences, but it all felt distant, unreal. The funeral was beautiful, exactly as she would have wanted. Her former students filled the church, standing in quiet rows, sharing stories of how she had shaped their lives. Some spoke of how she had pushed them to do better, believed in them when no one else did. Others told tales of her kindness, moments where she had helped in ways no one had ever known. I sat in the front row, clutching the tiny gold key necklace she had given me, trying to breathe through the grief that pressed against my chest like a vice. I was alone now, or at least, I thought I was. Then, I felt it before I even turned. That sharp, familiar prickle down my spine, the weight of old ghosts entering the room as if they had any right to be here. I turned slowly, and there they were. My mother, hair streaked with gray, her once perfect face now weathered. My father, heavier now, his confident posture forced. But their eyes? Those eyes hadn't changed. After 10 years of trying to forget them, I would have recognized them anywhere. My heart hammered against my ribs, my fingers tightening around the necklace as if it could somehow protect me from them. They moved toward me wearing practiced concern, their faces arranged in masks of grief. "Olivia, sweetheart," my mother murmured, reaching for my hand. I pulled away before she could touch me. "We came as soon as we heard," my father added, shaking his head solemnly as if he had the right to grieve her. "We're so sorry about your grandmother." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. For 10 years I had waited for this moment, imagined what I would say if they ever came back. But now that they were standing in front of me, all I could feel was rage. "You'll come home with us, of course," my mother continued, her voice firmer now, as if this was already a done deal. "You're still a minor for a few more months, and we're your legal guardians." The air seemed to drain from my lungs. I barely managed to force the words out. "I'm not going anywhere with you." My mother's expression hardened. "Olivia, don't be difficult. We are your parents. You have no choice in this matter." A coldness I knew all too well settled over me. This wasn't about me. They hadn't come to see me. They had come for what Grandma had left behind. But before I could respond, a voice cut through the thick tension. Actually, she has every choice. A deep voice interrupted, calm and measured, as if this moment had been expected. We all turned. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped forward, holding a leather briefcase. I'm Davies Morrison, Evelyn Montgomery's attorney, and we need to have a conversation about her will. For the first time since my parents had walked in, I saw something shift in their expressions. Greed. My mother's eyes flickered with poorly concealed interest. My father straightened his tie, glancing at the briefcase. They didn't even try to pretend they were here for me anymore. Davies Morrison gave them a polite, professional smile. Let's step into a private room. There are some matters that need to be addressed immediately. As I followed him, my heart pounded in my chest. My parents had walked back into my life like they still had control over me, but something told me they were about to get a very rude awakening. The private room inside the church felt too small, the air thick with tension. The polished wooden table between us might as well have been a battlefield. My parents sat on either side of me, but they weren't looking at me. Their eyes were locked on the man across from us, Davies Morrison, Grandma Evelyn's attorney. Davies was unshaken, his expression unreadable as he methodically laid out stacks of paperwork from his briefcase. He moved with a quiet confidence of someone who had done this before, someone who had prepared for exactly this moment. Before we begin, he said, adjusting his glasses. Miss Olivia, may I see your necklace? I hesitated, but slowly reached for the gold key around my neck, lifting it for him to see. Davies nodded approvingly. Perfect. My parents exchanged confused glances. My father cleared his throat. What does a necklace have to do with any of this? Davies ignored him, flipping open the first page of the legal documents. Now, let's proceed with the reading of Evelyn Montgomery's last will and testament. The room was so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. Davies began reading the legal formalities, but my mind drifted. This isn't real. This can't be real. Grandma was supposed to be here. I clutched the necklace in my palm, trying to steady myself. And then, to my beloved granddaughter, Olivia Montgomery, I leave my entire estate, including all properties, investments, bank accounts, and business holdings currently valued at approximately $57 million. The words slammed into me like a tidal wave. The room erupted. What? My mother shot up from her chair, her face turning an alarming shade of red. That's impossible. She was a school principal. My father slammed his fist on the table. This has to be a mistake. We are her children. How could she leave everything to a teenager? Davies, unfazed, calmly turned the page. There's no mistake. Evelyn Montgomery was an exceptionally intelligent investor. While she dedicated her life to education, she built Montgomery Investments from the ground up and maintained a portfolio of highly valuable assets. And per her wishes, all of it now belongs to Olivia. My father's nostrils flared. This isn't right. We abandoned her. Davies interrupted smoothly. You left Olivia in Evelyn's custody 10 years ago, and legally you signed away your rights. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another document, sliding it across the table. My mother's hands trembled as she grabbed it. Her eyes scanned the page, and her face drained of color. This is a copy of the legal abandonment papers Evelyn filed, Davies continued. You never responded to the court summons, so she was granted full custody. You haven't been Olivia's legal guardians for a very long time. I stared at them, waiting for some kind of reaction, some kind of acknowledgement of what they had done. But I saw in their faces, they weren't horrified that they had abandoned me. They were horrified that their actions had consequences. My mother's hands curled into fists. This can't be real. She was clearly manipulated. We will contest it. Davies didn't blink. You're welcome to try, but I assure you, every document is airtight. She planned for this, every signature, every clause, every financial transfer done with legal precision. My father leaned forward, gritting his teeth. You can't expect us to just walk away from our own mother's fortune. Davies met his stare with practiced ease. You already did, 10 years ago. Silence. I tightened my grip on my necklace, my fingers pressing against the smooth surface of the key. This was really happening. Everything had just changed. Davies cleared his throat. Additionally, the will specifies that Olivia is to be legally emancipated immediately. A trust has been established in her name to ensure financial security. My mother shook her head, her voice sharp. She's just a child. She doesn't know how to handle this kind of money. That's exactly why Evelyn spent years preparing her, Davies countered, and why she made sure neither of you would ever have access to a single cent. My mother's face twisted with fury. You don't understand what you're doing, Olivia, she hissed, her tone suddenly sickly sweet. Let us help you. We're family. I lifted my gaze and finally found my voice. Where was family when you left me? They didn't answer. Where was family for the past 10 years while Grandma raised me? My voice shook, but I didn't back down. You didn't come here for me. You came here for the money. My father exhaled harshly. We made mistakes, but we're here now. We can make things right. I let out a hollow laugh, the sound bitter on my tongue. Make things right? I pushed my chair back, rising to my feet, my hands still clenched into fists. You think you can just walk back into my life because there's money involved? That I'd let you? Their silence said everything. Davies straightened his papers, his face unreadable. There's one more thing. I turned as he slid a sealed envelope toward me. Evelyn left you a letter, he said softly. She asked that you read it alone. My throat tightened as I reached out, my hands trembling. The weight of the envelope felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. I didn't speak. I turned, walking toward the door, leaving my parents behind. They had already left me once. I wasn't going to let them do it again. I sat alone in one of the empty church pews, the letter trembling in my hands. The voices from the private room were muffled now, distant, mere background noise to the storm that was raging inside me. I traced my fingers over the envelope, feeling my grandmother's familiar handwriting. My name. It felt wrong. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to hear her words on paper instead of from her lips. But she had left this for me, knowing this moment would come. I took a deep breath and opened the envelope. My dearest Olivia, if you are reading this, then I am gone. And if I know your parents at all, they have already shown up, pretending to care, pretending to grieve. I wish I could spare you from this, but there are things you need to know. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The words blurred before me, but I forced myself to keep reading. You always wondered why they left. I saw it in your eyes, the way you waited by the window, the way you asked fewer and fewer questions as the years went on. I never wanted to burden you with the truth, but now it is time. I wiped my eyes, forcing myself to move forward. Your parents didn't just leave you, Olivia. They tried to steal everything from me. The words cut through me like a blade. I could barely breathe, but I gritted my teeth and continued. Years ago, they thought they could outsmart me. Your father, my own son, and your mother tried to transfer all my assets into their names while I was on a business trip. They assumed I was just a naive school principal, incapable of managing my own finances. They thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. I sucked in a breath, feeling the weight of every year I had spent wondering, feeling abandoned and wronged. Now the truth spilled over me, relentless. When I confronted them, I gave them a choice. They could stay, live modestly, work hard, rebuild their lives with integrity, or they could leave and get nothing. They chose money, Olivia. They chose money over their own daughter. Tears blurred my vision. My fingers clenched the letter so tightly it nearly tore. All these years, I had blamed myself. I had asked myself what I had done wrong, why I wasn't enough for them to stay. But now I knew. It had never been about me. It had never been about love. It had always been about greed. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep going. I never regretted taking you in. You were the greatest gift they unknowingly gave me. Watching you grow, seeing your kindness, your strength, your brilliance, I knew I had to protect you from them. That's why I never told you about the money. I wanted you to grow up knowing the value of hard work, of perseverance, of building something for yourself. A sob caught in my throat, but I continued. But now you must know the truth. They will try to manipulate you. They will lie. They will pretend to care. Do not believe them. You are stronger than they know. You are a Montgomery woman, and we don't break easily. All my love, Grandma Evelyn. I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands, my heart pounding in my chest. The truth crashed over me in waves. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had tried to steal from their own mother, and when they couldn't, they had walked away, leaving me behind like an afterthought. Not because they were struggling, not because they had no choice, because money meant more to them than their own child. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped me. They thought they could walk back into my life and take what wasn't theirs. They thought I would be weak, desperate for the love I had once begged for. But Grandma had seen this coming. She had prepared me for this moment. I wiped my tears, straightened my back, and clutched the key around my neck. I had spent 10 years waiting for them, but now it was time for them to watch me walk away. They didn't give up easily. For months, my parents tried everything to take what wasn't theirs. They hired lawyers to contest the will, dismissed. They claimed Grandma Evelyn was mentally unfit when she wrote it, proven false. They even attempted to argue that I, at 18, was too young to manage such wealth, legally irrelevant. Every single time, they hit a wall because Grandma had planned for this. Her will was airtight. Every document had been filed perfectly. Every clause, backed by years of legal preparation. There were no loopholes, no weak spots. And yet my parents still refused to accept it. Their final act of desperation came 3 months later. They stormed into Montgomery Investments, demanding to be heard. I was in a meeting when security called asking what I wanted to do. I should have told them to escort my parents out, but something inside me told me to end this myself. I stood tall as I walked down to the lobby, stepping out of the elevator in a tailored navy suit, one of Grandma's favorites that I'd claimed as my own. The key necklace sat against my collarbone, a silent reminder of who I was now. They saw me immediately. "You can't keep us out!" my mother snapped, her voice echoing through the marble walls. "This is our family business," my father added, his face flushed with anger. I met their glares calmly, folding my arms. "No, it's mine," my mother scoffed. "We raised you! You wouldn't have anything without us!" A bitter laugh escaped me. "You didn't raise me. Grandma did." Her eyes narrowed. "You can't erase us, Olivia. We're still your parents." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "You left me. Now I leave you." They weren't expecting that. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes, not of losing money, but of losing their last shred of control over me. But then my father straightened, jaw tight with frustration. "If you won't let us in, we'll take this public. The media will love a story about a spoiled teenager stealing her parents' rightful inheritance." I tilted my head slightly, eyes locking onto theirs. "Go ahead." My mother blinked in disbelief. "What?" I stepped forward, voice unwavering, sharp like a blade. "Tell the world how you abandoned your 8-year-old daughter." Their faces drained of color. "Tell them how you tried to steal from your own mother, how you signed away your rights, how you disappeared for 10 years only to come back when you smelled money." My father opened his mouth, then shut it, caught in his own lies. "Go on," I urged, my words cold. "Tell them everything." I saw it then, the fire in my mother's eyes dimming, her desperation growing. She glanced at my father, searching for a way out, a loophole, anything that could save them. But there was nothing. They had lost. They weren't the victims here. They were the villains. And now, finally, they saw it. The silence stretched on between us, thick with the weight of their defeat. I could see it in their eyes the moment they realized they had nothing left to fight for. They had gambled everything and walked away with nothing, just like always. My mother's lip curled into a sneer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'll regret this." I smiled, my voice steady. "No, I won't." And just like that, they turned and walked away out the door, out of my life, for good. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was over. I glanced down at the key around my neck, fingers tracing its edges. Grandma had been right. I was a Montgomery woman, and we don't break easily. I sat in Grandma's old office, now mine, as Davies Morrison plugged a USB drive into his laptop. The screen flickered to life, and there she was, Grandma Evelyn. Her warm smile, her wise eyes. She looked healthy, strong. She must have recorded this just before she passed. "Olivia, my darling girl," she began, her voice steady. "If you're watching this, then everything has happened exactly as I expected, and I know you, sweetheart. I know you're strong enough to handle it." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing. My fingers gripped the chair's arms tightly. "Your parents showed up at my funeral, didn't they?" Grandma chuckled softly. "Of course they did. They thought they could take what was never theirs to begin with." Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "But I didn't leave you just money, Olivia. I left you a mission." The video cut to images of children laughing, playing, carefree. "I built the Montgomery Foundation in secret, using our wealth to help abandoned and neglected children. And now, it's yours. You'll be its director. You'll decide how many lives we change." I pressed my hand to my chest, the key around my neck grounding me in that moment. "Use our fortune for good, Olivia, not to hoard or control, but to lift others up. That is our true legacy." The screen went black. I exhaled, a strange sense of peace washing over me. For months, I had been preparing for battle, standing firm against parents who had never deserved that title. Now it was time to build something far bigger than them. The weeks that followed were a blur. I officially took control of Montgomery Investments, meeting with board members who had worked with Grandma for years. They were skeptical at first, a teenage girl running a multi-million-dollar empire, but the moment I walked into the boardroom wearing Grandma's old principal blazer, I saw the knowing smiles on the faces of those who had known her best. They saw her in me. I wasn't just an heir stepping into wealth. I was a Montgomery woman. Some things I chose to keep the same. Grandma's old Toyota still sat in my garage, even though I could afford any car I wanted. I couldn't bring myself to sell it. It reminded me of where I came from, the woman who had built an empire but chose to live simply. Because true wealth isn't about what you own. It's about what you do with it. And as I signed the first round of scholarship approvals for abandoned children, I finally understood. I wasn't just Grandma's heir. I was her legacy. What do you do when the family you've been waiting for, the family you've been trying to please, finally shows up only to reveal their true intentions? Do you let them back in, or do you finally stand your ground and show them exactly who you've become? Olivia spent years longing for the love and acceptance of her parents, waiting for them to come back, to make up for the years they'd left her behind. But when they finally returned, it wasn't out of love, it was out of greed. They wanted what Grandma had left behind, and they weren't shy about showing it. Yet Olivia, despite the pain of their abandonment, didn't crumble. She stood tall, strong in the legacy her grandmother had left her. The truth hurt. It shattered the illusion Olivia had clung to for so long. But in that moment, when her parents attempted to take what wasn't theirs, Olivia realized she had everything she needed to move forward. Not wealth, not property, but the strength and wisdom Grandma had instilled in her. She didn't just take control of the family fortune, she took control of her life. And in the process, she built a future that honored her grandmother's true legacy, a legacy of giving, of making a difference, of standing firm. So, what would you have done in Olivia's shoes? Would you have let them back in, or would you have closed the door for good? Let's discuss in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more powerful stories.
The door slammed behind me with a resounding thud, the sound echoing through the empty house. "Jared, I'm home," I called out, kicking off my shoes and hanging up my coat. No response. Strange, I thought. His car was in the driveway. As I rounded the corner into the living room, the sight before me stopped me dead in my tracks. There on the couch was my husband locked in a passionate embrace with my sister-in-law, Miranda. Time seemed to freeze as a torrent of emotions flooded through me. Shock, betrayal, rage. What the hell is going on here? I shouted, my voice trembling. Jared and Miranda broke apart, their faces flushed with guilt and panic. "Callie, it's not what it looks like," Jared stammered, scrambling to his feet. "Not what it looks like." I spat back, my hands balling into fists. You were all over my sister, Jared. How could you do this to me? Miranda stood up, adjusting her disheveled clothing. Calm down, Callie, she said coolly. It was just a little harmless fun. The audacity of her words made my blood boil. Harmless fun? You're supposed to be my family! What's all this racket? Marlene's shrill voice cut through the air as she emerged from the kitchen, her eyes narrowing at the scene before her. Your son and daughter have been carrying on an affair behind my back, I spat, glaring at the two of them. Marlene scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. Don't be so dramatic, Callie. This family doesn't need your overreactions. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother-in-law was defending their betrayal. Are you serious right now, Marlene? How can you be okay with this? Enough, Jared shouted, his face flushed with anger. You're blowing this way out of proportion, Callie. It was just a stupid mistake. A mistake? The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. I looked around at the three of them, my so-called family, and felt a profound sense of isolation wash over me. In that moment, I realized that, no matter what I said or did, they would never take my side. I was alone in this. Tears stung my eyes as I fought to maintain my composure. You know what? I'm done, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of sadness and determination. I'm done with all of you and your lies. Without another word, I turned and stormed out of the living room, grabbing my coat and keys on the way out. As I flung open the front door, I heard Marlene's voice call out behind me. Don't be so dramatic, Callie. You'll be back. But as I stepped out into the cool night air, I knew in my heart that she was wrong. This was the end of the road for us. I had finally seen them for who they truly were, and there was no going back. I slammed the car door shut and peeled out of the driveway, tears streaming down my face. How could this be happening? Just a few years ago, Jared and I were so happy, so in love. We had dreams of starting a family, growing old together in a little house with a white picket fence. That future now seemed like a cruel mirage. I thought back to the day we first met at the hospital cafeteria. I was a young nurse, and he was a charming medical student doing his rounds. He flashed that dazzling smile and struck up a conversation, and I was instantly smitten. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared passion for helping others and our desire for a simple, peaceful life together. Those early years were blissful. Jared was attentive, caring, and always put me first. But as time went on, cracks began to show. His spending habits spiraled out of control, and he racked up debt faster than I could keep track of. I tried to talk to him about it, but he always brushed it off, promising he had it under control. Then there was Miranda. From the moment I met her, I sensed something off about her. She was always a little too friendly with Jared, a little too touchy-feely, but I pushed those thoughts aside, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. When Jared suggested we move in with his mother to ease our financial burden, I was hesitant, but he assured me it would only be temporary, and I reluctantly agreed. Little did I know, I was walking straight into a web of lies and manipulation. Marlene's house was like a prison, with unspoken rules and a suffocating atmosphere of hostility. She and Miranda treated me like an outsider, constantly belittling me and undermining my authority. Jared, spineless as ever, did nothing to defend me, too busy seeking his mother's approval. While I worked long shifts at the hospital, trying to keep us afloat, Marlene and Miranda lounged around the house, idle and resentful of my absence. They would deliberately create chaos and disarray, disrupting my routine and making it impossible for me to find any sense of peace or order. And Jared? He was too busy burying his head in the sand, ignoring the mounting tensions and the growing rift in our marriage. I tried to talk to him to make him see what was happening, but he refused to listen. He was so desperate for his mother's love and approval that he was willing to sacrifice our relationship for it. As I drove aimlessly through the night, my mind raced with 1,000 thoughts and emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal, they all swirled together in a toxic cocktail. But beneath it all, I felt a glimmer of something else. Determination. I may have been trapped in their web of lies and manipulation, but I wouldn't let them break me. I was stronger than that, stronger than they could ever imagine. After that fateful night, I found myself thrust into a new reality, one where the walls of Marlene's house felt like they were closing in on me. The air was thick with unspoken rules and covert hostility, and I struggled to find my footing in this oppressive atmosphere. Marlene and Miranda made it clear from the start that I was an outsider in their domain. They would exchange pointed looks and whispered comments whenever I entered a room, their eyes boring into me with a mixture of disdain and contempt. "Honestly, Callie, must you leave such a mess everywhere you go?" Marlene would sneer, gesturing to the perfectly tidy living room. Miranda would chime in with a smirk. "I don't know how you manage to make such a pigsty out of everything." Their words were like daggers, chipping away at my self-worth bit by bit. And Jared? He remained silent, too spineless to stand up for me against his mother's constant belittling. While I worked long, grueling shifts at the hospital, trying to make ends meet, Marlene and Miranda lounged around the house, idle and resentful of my absence. They would deliberately create chaos and disarray, leaving messes for me to clean up when I returned home, exhausted and drained. "Callie, darling, you really should learn to keep a tighter ship around here," Marlene would tut, her eyes glinting with malice. It was a twisted game of control, and they were determined to make me the loser. Jared's dependency on his mother's approval became more apparent with each passing day. He would cower and capitulate to her every whim, too afraid to risk her disapproval. Our marriage, once a source of joy and strength, had become a battleground, and I was fighting a losing war. "Jared, please, can't you see what they're doing?" I pleaded with him one night, tears streaming down my face. "They're tearing us apart, piece by piece." But he just shook his head, his eyes downcast. "You're overreacting, Callie. They're family. We have to stick together." Stick together? The irony of his words was almost too much to bear. Hadn't they already shattered that sacred bond with their betrayal? As the days turned into weeks, the weight of their constant belittling and manipulation began to take its toll. I found myself withdrawing, retreating into the sanctuary of my work, where at least I could find a brief respite from the chaos. It was there, in the halls of the hospital, that I met Lucas, a kind-hearted man whose son was one of my patients. We struck up a friendship, bonding over our shared love of literature and our desire to find peace in this chaotic world. With Lucas, I didn't have to put on a brave face or pretend everything was okay. He saw through the cracks in my armor and offered a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. His empathy and support were like a lifeline, reminding me that there was still goodness in the world, even amidst the darkness I was enduring. As our connection deepened, I began to question the life I had resigned myself to. Was this really all I deserved? To be belittled and disrespected by the very people who were supposed to love and cherish me? A spark of defiance began to flicker within me, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through so many challenges in my life. I may have been trapped in their web of lies and manipulation, but I refused to let them break me. Not this time. As the weeks dragged on, Marlene and Miranda's manipulative games intensified. It was as if they took perverse pleasure in tightening their control over me, squeezing the last vestiges of self-worth from my soul. "Callie, darling, did you really think that outfit was appropriate for work?" Marlene would sneer, her eyes raking over me with disdain. "You're a nurse, not a streetwalker." Miranda would chime in with a cruel laugh. "Yeah, Callie, leave something to the imagination, won't you?" Their words were like knives, cutting deep into my already fragile psyche. I would retreat into myself, trying to tune out their constant barrage of insults and belittling comments. But it wasn't just their words that tormented me. Miranda took a particular delight in disrupting my work life, creating chaos and disarray at home that would bleed into my professional responsibilities. She would deliberately leave messes around the house, knowing I would have to rush to clean them up before my shift. Or she would accidentally misplace my scrubs or work bag, forcing me to scramble to find them before I was late. "Oops, sorry, Callie," she would say with a sickly sweet smile. "I must have misplaced your things again. You really should be more organized." It was a twisted game, and I was the unwitting pawn. Through it all, Jared remained silent, too cowardly to stand up to his mother and sister. He would watch as they tore me down, piece by piece, too afraid of losing their approval to intervene. "Jared, please," I would beg him, tears streaming down my face. "Can't you see what they're doing to me? To us?" But he would just shake his head, his eyes downcast. "They're family, Callie. We have to stick together." Stick together? The irony of his words was almost too much to bear. It was during those dark days that I found solace in my work at the hospital. There, I could escape the suffocating atmosphere of Marlene's house and find a brief respite from the constant barrage of abuse. And it was there that I met Lucas, a kind-hearted man whose son was one of my patients. We struck up a friendship almost immediately, bonding over our shared love of literature and our desire to find peace in this chaotic world. With Lucas, I didn't have to put on a brave face or pretend everything was okay. He saw through the cracks in my armor and offered a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. His empathy and support were like a lifeline, reminding me that there was still goodness in the world, even amidst the darkness I was enduring. As our connection deepened, I began to question the life I had resigned myself to. Was this really all I deserved? To be belittled and disrespected by the very people who were supposed to love and cherish me? A spark of defiance began to flicker within me, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through so many challenges in my life. I may have been trapped in their web of lies and manipulation, but I refused to let them break me. Not this time. With Lucas's encouragement, I started to stand up for myself, pushing back against Marlene and Miranda's constant barrage of insults and mind games. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "You know what, Marlene?" I said one day, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm done letting you and Miranda treat me like garbage. I deserve better than this." Marlene's eyes widened in shock, clearly unaccustomed to such defiance from me, but before she could respond, I turned and walked away, my head held high. It was a small victory, but it was the first step on a long road to reclaiming my self-worth and my life. As the weeks passed, the tension in the house grew thicker, like a suffocating blanket weighing down on me. Marlene and Miranda's barbs became sharper, their insults more cutting, as if they could sense my newfound defiance and were determined to snuff it out. "Look at you, Callie, acting all high and mighty," Marlene sneered one evening as I returned from a long shift at the hospital. "Don't forget your place in this household." Miranda chimed in with a cruel laugh. "Yeah, Callie, you're nothing but a burden to us all. You should be grateful we even let you stay here." Their words stung, but I refused to let them see how much they affected me. I held my head high and walked past them, my jaw clenched in determination. But Jared, as always, remained silent, too cowardly to stand up to his mother and sister. He would watch as they tore me down, piece by piece, too afraid of losing their approval to intervene. Finally, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. As Marlene and Miranda launched into yet another tirade, berating me for some perceived slight, something inside me snapped. "Enough!" I shouted, slamming my fist down on the kitchen table. "I'm done with this constant abuse, this never-ending barrage of insults and belittling." Marlene's eyes widened in shock, clearly unaccustomed to such defiance from me. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own house?" she hissed, her face contorted with rage. "Your house?" I spat back, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and newfound courage. "This was supposed to be my home too, Marlene, but you and Miranda have made it a living hell for me." Miranda scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic, Callie. We're just trying to help you fit in with this family." "Fit in?" I laughed bitterly. "You've made it abundantly clear that I'll never be a part of this family. Not really." Jared, who had been sitting silently in the corner, finally spoke up. "Callie, please, let's not make a scene." I whirled on him, my eyes blazing with fury. "A scene? Is that all you care about, Jared? Keeping up appearances while your own family tears me apart?" He flinched, shrinking back from the intensity of my gaze. I just think we should all try to get along," he mumbled weakly. "Get along?" I shook my head in disbelief. "How can I get along with people who have made it their mission to destroy me? To strip away every last shred of my self-worth and dignity?" Marlene stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, young lady. You're the one who's brought nothing but drama and chaos into this family." "Drama and chaos?" I laughed bitterly. "That's rich, coming from the woman who's been orchestrating this whole twisted game from the start." Miranda sneered. "Game? Don't flatter yourself, Callie. You're not worth the effort." That was the final straw. I felt something inside me snap, a dam of pent-up frustration and anger finally bursting forth. "You know what? I'm done," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm done with all of you and your lies, your manipulation, your constant need to tear me down." Marlene's eyes widened in shock, clearly not expecting such defiance from me. "You ungrateful little—" But I didn't let her finish. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the kitchen, heading straight for the bedroom to pack my bags. "Callie, wait!" Jared called out, trailing behind me. "Where are you going?" I whirled around to face him, my eyes blazing with a mix of anger and determination. "I'm leaving, Jared. I'm leaving this toxic household, and I'm leaving you." His face fell, a flicker of fear passing over his features. But where will you go?" I shook my head, a sad smile tugging at my lips. "Anywhere but here. Anywhere I can finally be free of this constant abuse, this never-ending cycle of manipulation and control." As I stuffed the last of my belongings into my suitcase, I heard Marlene's shrill voice echoing down the hallway. "Don't be so dramatic, Callie. You'll be back, crawling and begging for our forgiveness." But as I stepped out into the cool night air, suitcase in hand, I knew in my heart that she was wrong. This was the end of the road for us, the final chapter in a story of betrayal and broken trust. I glanced back one last time at the house that had once been my home, a sense of finality settling over me. "You won't break me," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "You'll regret losing me." And with that, I turned and walked away, my head held high, and my heart filled with a newfound sense of determination. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The night I left Marlene's house, I felt a strange mix of emotions, fear, sadness, but also a profound sense of relief. As I drove away, the weight of years of emotional abuse and manipulation seemed to lift from my shoulders, replaced by a newfound determination to take control of my life. In the days that followed, I found a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a far cry from the oppressive atmosphere of my former home. It was small and sparsely furnished, but to me it felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe without the constant weight of judgment and criticism bearing down on me. As I settled into my new life, I threw myself into my work at the hospital, finding solace in the familiar routine and the knowledge that I was making a difference in people's lives. It was there that I reconnected with Lucas, the kind-hearted man whose support had been a lifeline during my darkest days. We would often grab coffee together during our breaks, and I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone else. He listened without judgment, offering words of encouragement and understanding that helped to heal the deep emotional wounds left by my failed marriage and the betrayal of my own family. "You're so strong, Callie," he would say, his eyes filled with a warmth and sincerity that I had almost forgotten existed. "What you've been through would have broken most people, but you've come out the other side, even more resilient." His words resonated deeply within me, reminding me of the inner strength that had carried me through so many challenges in my life. I may have been beaten down, but I refused to be broken. With Lucas's support, I began to rediscover the parts of myself that I had lost along the way. My love of reading, my passion for gardening, my appreciation for the simple pleasures in life. I reconnected with old friends, rekindling relationships that had been neglected during the tumultuous years of my marriage. Slowly but surely, I felt myself coming back to life, like a flower blooming after a long, harsh winter. In my quieter moments, I would reflect on the emotional scars left by my ordeal, the deep cuts inflicted by the very people who were supposed to love and cherish me. But instead of wallowing in bitterness and resentment, I found solace in my own resilience, in the knowledge that I had emerged from that darkness stronger and more self-assured than ever before. "You know, Lucas," I said to him one day as we sat sipping our coffee in the hospital cafeteria, "I used to think that my life was defined by the people around me, my husband, my in-laws, the roles I played for them. But now I realize that my life is my own, and I'm the one who gets to write my story." He smiled, reaching across the table to give my hand a gentle squeeze. "And what a beautiful story it's going to be, Callie. You've already overcome so much, and the best is yet to come." As I looked into his kind eyes, I felt a warmth bloom in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced in far too long. It was the promise of new beginnings, of a future filled with possibility and hope. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace, secure in the knowledge that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had the strength and resilience to face them head-on. The road to empowerment had been long and arduous, but I had emerged on the other side, stronger and more self-assured than ever before. It had been several months since I had walked out of Marlene's house, leaving behind the toxic web of lies and manipulation that had nearly broken me. In that time, I had worked hard to rebuild my life, embracing my newfound independence and rediscovering the parts of myself that I had lost along the way. So when my phone rang one afternoon and I saw Marlene's name flashing across the screen, I felt a surge of anger and resentment. How dare she try to worm her way back into my life after everything she had put me through? "What do you want, Marlene?" I answered, my voice clipped and cold. There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if she was taken aback by my icy tone. "Callie, dear, is that any way to speak to your mother-in-law?" I scoffed. "You lost the right to call yourself that the moment you betrayed me and took their side." Another pause, then a heavy sigh. "Callie, I need your help." Those words hung in the air, and for a moment, I was tempted to simply hang up the phone and be done with it. But a part of me, the part that still clung to the naive hope that she might actually show some remorse, made me hesitate. "What could you possibly need my help with?" I asked, my voice dripping with disdain. It's Jared and Miranda," she said, her voice trembling. "They've made a mess of things, and now we're in real trouble." I felt a flicker of satisfaction at the admission, but I pushed it aside. "And why should I care about your problems, Marlene? After the way you all treated me, why would I lift a finger to help you?" "Please, Callie," she pleaded, her usual haughty demeanor crumbling. "We're in over our heads here. Jared's financial mistakes, Miranda's reckless spending, it's all caught up to us, and we're drowning." I could hear the desperation in her voice, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice low and measured. "You're calling me, the same woman you belittled and abused for years, begging for help to clean up the mess you and your precious children have made." Silence on the other end of the line. "Well, let me tell you something, Marlene," I continued, my voice rising with each word. "You had your chance to treat me with respect, to stand by me as family should, but instead you chose to tear me down, to make me feel worthless and alone." I could hear her shallow breathing, but she didn't interrupt. "So you know what? You can take your problems and your pleas for help, and you can shove them. I'm done being your scapegoat, your punching bag. You made your bed, Marlene, and now you can lie in it." With that, I hung up the phone, a triumphant smile spreading across my face. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to Marlene and her manipulative games, and it felt incredible. As I basked in the afterglow of my newfound power, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The toxic ties that had once bound me to that family were finally severed, and I was free to move forward with my life, unburdened by their drama and dysfunction. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, I sat down and penned a heartfelt letter to Lucas, the man whose kindness and support had been a guiding light during my darkest days. I poured out my gratitude, thanking him for helping me find the strength to break free from the chains of my past and embrace the future with open arms. And as I sealed the envelope, I couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement at the thought of what that future might hold. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive, ready to embark on a new chapter, filled with possibility and hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was no longer the broken, defeated woman who had walked out of Marlene's house all those months ago. I was stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before, a true survivor who had faced down her demons and emerged victorious. In the months that followed my decisive break from Marlene and her toxic family, my life blossomed in ways I had never imagined possible. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, freeing me to embrace the world with open arms and an open heart. I threw myself into my work at the hospital, finding immense fulfillment in the simple act of caring for others. My colleagues remarked on the newfound confidence and radiance that seemed to emanate from me, a stark contrast to the broken, defeated woman I had been just a few months prior. As my self-assurance grew, I found myself becoming a mentor of sorts to the younger nurses on the floor. They would seek me out, drawn to the aura of resilience and strength that surrounded me, eager to learn from my experiences and the hard-won wisdom I had gained. "How did you find the courage to walk away from such a toxic situation?" one young nurse asked me one day, her eyes wide with a mixture of admiration and trepidation. I smiled, reaching out to give her hand a gentle squeeze. It wasn't easy, believe me. There were moments when I thought the weight of it all would crush me. But deep down, I knew that I deserved better, that we all deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, no matter what. She nodded, hanging on my every word as I recounted the harrowing journey that had led me to this point. The betrayal, the emotional abuse, the ultimate decision to break free and reclaim my life. "You're so strong, Callie," she murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "I hope I can be half as brave as you someday." In those moments, I felt a profound sense of purpose wash over me. My story, the tale of my resilience in the face of adversity, had the power to inspire and empower others. It was a legacy far greater than I could have ever imagined. Outside of work, my life continued to blossom in unexpected ways. I reconnected with old friends, rekindling relationships that had fallen by the wayside during the tumultuous years of my marriage. We would gather for dinners and movie nights, laughing and reminiscing about the carefree days of our youth. And then there was Lucas, the kind-hearted man whose unwavering support had been a guiding light during my darkest hours. Our friendship deepened, evolving into something more, a connection that transcended mere words, a bond forged in the fires of shared struggle and mutual understanding. As we spent more time together, I found myself opening up to him in ways I never thought possible, sharing the deepest corners of my heart and soul. And in his warm embrace, I found a sense of peace and acceptance that had eluded me for far too long. On quiet evenings, when the city was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, I would gaze out over the skyline from the comfort of my modest apartment, marveling at the journey that had brought me to this point. The road had been long and arduous, paved with heartbreak and betrayal, but I had emerged on the other side stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. In those moments of quiet reflection, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for the trials that had tested my mettle, for the people who had lifted me up when I could no longer stand on my own, and for the indomitable spirit that had carried me through it all. As the city lights twinkled like a million tiny stars, I smiled to myself, secure in the knowledge that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was equipped to face them head-on. The path forward was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was no longer the broken, defeated woman who had walked out of Marlene's house all those months ago. I was a survivor, a warrior, a beacon of strength and resilience for all those who dared to dream of a better life. And as I gazed out over the vast expanse of possibility that stretched before me, I knew that the best was yet to come. The crunch of gravel under the tires signaled our arrival home. Hank and I had just returned from a blissful week-long anniversary trip, and I was eager to settle back into our peaceful suburban life in Ohio. As we stepped out of the car, a strange noise from inside the house made me pause. "Hank, did you hear that? Maybe there's someone in the house," I asked, my voice laced with anxiety. Hank dismissed my concern with a reassuring smile. "It's all right, sweetheart. Let me check it out." He strode towards the front door, keys jingling in his hand. I followed closely behind, my heart pounding in my chest. As we entered the living room, I was initially relieved to find no intruders. However, that relief quickly turned to shock as I took in the scene before me. There, lounging on our couch, was Hank's mother, Marjorie, and his sister, Belinda. They looked up at us with an air of entitlement, as if they had every right to be there. "What took you so long? We've been waiting," Marjorie commanded, her voice sharp and demanding. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process the invasion of our home. Hank, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. He greeted his mother and sister warmly, as if their unexpected presence was a pleasant surprise. As I peered around the cluttered living room, taking in the suitcases and personal belongings strewn about, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. It was clear that Marjorie and Belinda had no intention of leaving any time soon. "Why didn't you tell us you were coming?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Belinda waved her hand dismissively. "We're family, Elena. We don't need an invitation." I bristled at her casual disregard for our privacy. Hank, sensing my discomfort, placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's okay, honey. They're just here for a little visit." But as I looked into Marjorie's calculating eyes and Belinda's smug expression, I knew this was more than a simple visit. They had come to stake their claim on our lives, and I felt powerless to stop them. Over the next few hours, I watched helplessly as Marjorie and Belinda made themselves at home. They rearranged furniture, critiqued my housekeeping, and demanded to be waited on hand and foot. Hank, ever the dutiful son and brother, catered to their every whim, leaving me to bear the brunt of their constant demands and criticisms. As the day wore on, the weight of their presence grew heavier. I retreated to the kitchen, seeking solace in the familiar task of preparing dinner. But even there, I couldn't escape Marjorie's watchful gaze. "You need to start cooking proper meals. Fast food won't do for us," she declared, her tone dripping with disapproval. I bit back a retort, knowing that arguing would only make matters worse. Hank, who had joined us in the kitchen, remained silent, his loyalty clearly lying with his mother. That night, as I lay in bed next to Hank, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. The peaceful life we had built together felt like it was slipping away, replaced by a suffocating sense of intrusion and betrayal. I closed my eyes, trying to will away the tears that threatened to fall. I knew I had to find a way to reclaim my home and my life, but with Hank's unwavering support for his family, I feared I would have to face this battle alone. As I drifted off into a restless sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. How had my once happy marriage come to this? The morning sun streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the kitchen table. I sat there, nursing a cup of coffee, trying to find a moment of peace before the day's chaos began. The sound of footsteps approaching made me tense. "Good morning, Elena," Marjorie said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I see you're up early. I hope you're planning on making a proper breakfast for us." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "Of course, Marjorie. What would you like?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Something hearty. None of that prepackaged nonsense. You need to start cooking proper meals. Fast food won't do for us." I bit back a retort, knowing that arguing would only make matters worse. As I began preparing breakfast, Belinda sauntered into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the room critically. "I don't believe in boundaries between family members," she declared, picking up a framed photo of Hank and me from our anniversary trip. "You don't mind if I look around, do you?" Before I could respond, she was already rummaging through the drawers and cabinets, invading every corner of my kitchen. I felt my frustration mounting, but Hank's entrance into the room stopped me from speaking up. "Smells great, honey," he said, kissing me on the cheek. "Mom, Belinda, I hope you slept well." As Hank engaged in pleasant conversation with his mother and sister, I felt increasingly isolated. It was as if I was a stranger in my own home, my opinions and feelings disregarded at every turn. Later that day, I sought solace at the community center, where I volunteered. As I sorted through donated clothing, my friend Claire noticed my distress. "Elena, what's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I poured out my heart to her, sharing the frustrations and helplessness I felt with Marjorie and Belinda's constant intrusions. Claire listened patiently, offering a sympathetic ear. "I know it's tough, but try to be patient," she advised. "They're family, after all. Maybe things will get better with time." I nodded, appreciating her support, but deep down, I knew that patience alone wouldn't solve my problems. I needed to find a way to assert myself and reclaim my life. When I returned home that evening, I found Marjorie and Belinda lounging in the living room, watching television. They barely acknowledged my presence as I walked in. "Dinner will be ready in an hour," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. Marjorie sniffed. "An hour? In my day, dinner was always on the table by 6 o'clock sharp." I retreated to the kitchen, my heart heavy with the weight of their constant criticism. As I chopped vegetables and stirred pots, I couldn't help but wonder how much longer I could endure this suffocating atmosphere. Hank joined me in the kitchen, wrapping his arms around my waist. Everything okay, sweetheart? I leaned into his embrace, craving his support. It's just a lot, having your mother and sister here all the time. He sighed. I know it's an adjustment, but they're family. We have to make it work. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. But as I watched Hank leave the kitchen to join his mother and sister, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was fighting a losing battle. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of how to reclaim my home and my life. I knew that something had to change, but with Hank's unwavering loyalty to his family, I feared that I would have to face this challenge alone. I closed my eyes, determined to find the strength within myself to stand up for what I deserved. No matter how difficult the path ahead might be, I knew I had to fight for my happiness and my peace of mind. Days turned into weeks, and Marjorie and Belinda's presence in our home became increasingly suffocating. I found myself constantly walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate their every need and whim to avoid their scathing criticism. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry in the bedroom, I heard a commotion coming from the living room. I rushed out to find Belinda standing over my favorite quilt, a large coffee stain spreading across the delicate fabric. "Oh, Alina, I'm so sorry," she said, her tone insincere. "I accidentally spilled my coffee. But it's just a quilt, right? You're overreacting. It's not a big deal." I felt my blood boil as I gently picked up the quilt, assessing the damage. This quilt had been a gift from my grandmother, a cherished family heirloom. Belinda's casual dismissal of its importance cut me to the core. As I carried the quilt to the kitchen sink, trying to salvage it, I noticed that the drawers and cabinets had been rummaged through. My personal belongings were strewn about, as if someone had been snooping. I confronted Belinda, my voice shaking with anger. "Have you been going through my things?" She shrugged, a smirk playing on her lips. "I was just looking for a coaster. You really should keep your house more organized, Elena." I felt my frustration reaching a boiling point. I had tolerated their intrusions and disrespect for too long. It was time to take a stand. That evening, as Hank and I prepared for bed, I finally found the courage to speak up. "Hank, I can't live like this anymore. Your mother and sister are invading every part of our life. They have to leave." Hank's eyes narrowed, his voice cold. "They're family, Elena. If you can't handle that, maybe you're the one who should go." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always known that Hank prioritized his mother and sister's needs above mine, but to hear him say it so bluntly shattered my heart. I lay awake that night, tears streaming down my face as I realized the gravity of the situation. My own husband had chosen his toxic family over me, leaving me to face this battle alone. The next morning, I found Marjorie in the kitchen, criticizing my cooking skills as usual. "Really, Elena, I don't know how you manage to keep a husband with these subpar meals." Something inside me snapped. I slammed the spatula down on the counter, my voice trembling with rage. "Enough, Marjorie. I have had enough of your constant belittling and disrespect. This is my home, and I deserve to be treated with kindness and dignity." Marjorie's eyes widened in shock, unused to being challenged. "How dare you speak to me like that? I am the matriarch of this family, and you will show me the respect I deserve." I stood my ground, my voice growing stronger. "Respect is earned, Marjorie, and you have done nothing to earn mine. You have invaded my home, criticized my every move, and turned my husband against me. I won't stand for it any longer." Hank entered the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" I turned to him, my eyes blazing with determination. "I'm done, Hank. I can't live like this anymore. If you can't stand up for me, for our marriage, then I have to do it myself." I walked out of the kitchen, leaving a stunned Hank and a fuming Marjorie behind. I knew that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey, but I also knew that I had to fight for my own happiness and peace of mind. As I packed a bag, tears streaming down my face, I felt a sense of both sorrow and liberation. I was leaving behind the life I had built with Hank, but I was also taking the first step towards reclaiming my identity and my self-worth. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I had to be strong, I had to be brave, and most importantly, I had to be true to myself. With a heavy heart and a small suitcase in hand, I arrived at my sister's home in a nearby town. Claire, my lifelong friend and confidante, greeted me at the door with open arms and a sympathetic smile. "Oh, Elena," she said, pulling me into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. You deserve so much better." As we settled into her cozy living room, I poured out my heart to Claire, sharing the pain and betrayal I had endured at the hands of Hank and his family. She listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. "You deserve respect, not this torment," Claire said, her voice firm with conviction. "You've given so much to your marriage, to Hank. It's time to focus on yourself and your own happiness." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had spent so many years putting Hank's needs before my own, sacrificing my dreams and desires to be the perfect wife. But where had that gotten me? Alone, in my sister's guest room while my husband sided with his toxic mother and sister. As the days passed, I found myself reflecting on the early years of my marriage to Hank. We had been so in love, so full of hope and promise. I remembered the way he used to look at me, his eyes filled with adoration and respect. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Hank's loyalty had shifted, his priorities rearranged. I realized now that I had been slowly losing myself, piece by piece, in an effort to maintain the illusion of a happy marriage. One evening, as Claire and I sat on the porch sipping tea, I confided in her about my fears for the future. "I don't know how to do this, Claire. I've been with Hank for so long. How do I start over?" She reached out and squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with understanding. "One day at a time, Elena. You're stronger than you know, and you have me and your sister and so many others who love and support you." Her words gave me the courage I needed to take the next steps. I began to plan for my new life, searching for an apartment and reaching out to old friends for support. But even as I took these steps towards independence, my heart ached for the life I had left behind. I found myself reminiscing about the happy moments with Hank, the laughter and love we had shared. Late one night, as I lay awake in bed, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Hank. "I miss you," it read. "Please come home." For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he had finally seen the error of his ways. Maybe he was ready to stand up for our marriage. But as quickly as the hope had come, it was extinguished by the memory of his cold words, his unwavering loyalty to his mother and sister. I knew that going back would only lead to more pain, more heartbreak. With a heavy sigh, I typed out a response. "I'm sorry, Hank, but I can't live like that anymore. I need to do what's best for me." Hitting send, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief wash over me. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that there would be moments of doubt and loneliness. But I also knew that I was taking the first steps towards reclaiming my life, my identity. I had spent so long living for others, putting their needs before my own. It was time to focus on my own happiness, my own dreams. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but I also knew that I had the strength and resilience to weather any storm. And with the support of my loved ones, I knew that I could build a new life for myself, one filled with joy, purpose, and the respect I deserved. Weeks turned into months as I settled into my new life in a small apartment across town. The space was modest, but it was mine. A sanctuary free from the constant criticism and intrusion that had plagued me in my former home. I threw myself into decorating the apartment, choosing colors and furnishings that brought me joy. It was a small act of reclaiming my identity, of creating a space that reflected who I was and what I valued. But even as I found solace in my new surroundings, the ghosts of my past lingered. Memories of my life with Hank, both good and bad, seemed to lurk around every corner. One evening, as I was unpacking a box of old photographs, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, my heart skipping a beat when I saw Hank's name. "Hello?" I answered tentatively. "Elena." Hank's voice was strained. "Mom and Belinda say they miss you. You need to apologize and come back." I felt a surge of anger at his words. After everything I had endured, he still couldn't see the pain his family had caused me. "I'm not coming back, Hank," I said firmly. "I deserve better than the way they treated me, the way you allowed them to treat me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I don't know what you want me to say, Elena. They're my family." "And I was your wife," I countered, my voice cracking with emotion, "but that didn't seem to matter when they were making my life a living hell." Hank sighed heavily. I'm sorry, Alina. I really am. But I can't change who they are. I closed my eyes, realizing that this was the closure I needed. Hank would never stand up for me, never prioritize our marriage over his toxic family dynamics. Goodbye, Hank, I said softly, ending the call before he could respond. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my new life with renewed determination. I volunteered at the community center, finding fulfillment in helping others navigate their own challenges. But just as I was beginning to find my footing, I received a devastating blow. A thick envelope arrived in the mail, bearing the return address of Hank's lawyer. With trembling hands, I opened it to find divorce papers, cold and impersonal in their legal jargon. I knew our separation had been leading to this moment, but seeing it in black and white still took my breath away. Tears blurred my vision as I signed the papers, officially ending the marriage I had once believed would last a lifetime. As I struggled to come to terms with this new reality, I received another shock. Claire called me one evening, her voice tight with concern. Elena, I hate to be the one to tell you this, she began hesitantly, but I saw Hank out with another woman today. They looked close. I felt as though I had been punched in the gut. The ink was barely dry on our divorce papers, and Hank had already moved on. In the days that followed, I learned more about Hank's new girlfriend, Clara. She was younger than me, in her early 50s, with a successful career and a confident air about her. I couldn't help but compare myself to her, feeling the sting of inadequacy. Had I been so easily replaced? Was our decades-long marriage so meaningless to Hank? But even as I grappled with the pain of Hank's betrayal, I refused to let it break me. I had come too far, fought too hard for my independence to let this setback derail me. With a renewed sense of determination, I focused on my own healing and growth. I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but I also knew that I had the strength to weather any storm. I was no longer the woman who had allowed herself to be diminished and disrespected. I was Elena, a survivor, a fighter, and a woman who knew her own worth, and I would never let anyone take that away from me again. The annual neighborhood block party was in full swing, the air filled with the aroma of barbecue and the laughter of children playing. I had debated whether to attend, knowing that Hank and his family would likely be there, but Claire had convinced me that I couldn't hide away forever. As I navigated the crowded street, I spotted Marjorie and Belinda huddled together, their eyes narrowing as they caught sight of me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation. Well, look who decided to show up, Marjorie sneered as I approached. I'm surprised you had the nerve to come, after the way you abandoned your family. I felt my cheeks flush with anger, but I refused to let her see how much her words stung. I didn't abandon anyone, Marjorie. I left a toxic situation that was destroying me. Belinda scoffed. You're just selfish, Elena. You couldn't handle a little bit of family drama, so you ran away like a coward. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, a familiar figure appeared at Marjorie's side. It was Clara, Hank's new girlfriend, her arm linked possessively through his. It's no wonder Hank found someone new, Marjorie said, her voice dripping with disdain. You're a quitter, Elena. You didn't have the strength to make your marriage work. I felt as though I had been slapped. The sight of Clara standing there, a smug smile on her face, was like salt in an open wound. But as I stood there, facing the people who had caused me so much pain, something inside me snapped. I was done being a victim, done letting them control the narrative of my life. I squared my shoulders, looking Marjorie directly in the eye. You want to talk about family values, Marjorie? About loyalty and commitment? Then let's talk about what you did to your own sister. Marjorie's face paled, her eyes widening in shock. I don't know what you're talking about, she sputtered. But I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that her carefully crafted facade was about to crumble. You preached about the importance of family, but you betrayed your own flesh and blood, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. You stole your sister's inheritance, leaving her penniless and alone. And then you had the audacity to cut her out of your life when she needed you most. Belinda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Hank looked stunned, his eyes darting between his mother and me. That's not true, Marjorie said weakly, but her voice lacked conviction. I shook my head. It is true, and you know it. You're not the paragon of virtue you pretend to be, Marjorie. You're a hypocrite and a liar. I could feel the eyes of the other partygoers on us, the whispers and murmurs growing louder with each revelation. But I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt truly empowered. Clara stepped forward. Her face twisted with anger. "How dare you speak to Marjorie that way?" she hissed. "You have no right." "No, Clara," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "You don't get to lecture me about rights. You inserted yourself into my family, into my marriage, without a second thought for the damage you were causing." I turned back to Marjorie, my gaze unwavering. "I'm done letting you control me, Marjorie. I'm done letting you poison my life with your lies and your manipulation. From now on, I'm taking back my power, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, my head held high. I could hear Marjorie sputtering behind me, Belinda's shrill voice rising in indignation. But I didn't look back. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. I had spoken my truth, exposed the ugliness that had been lurking beneath the surface for so long. And in doing so, I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life and my happiness. There would be more battles to come, more obstacles to overcome. But I knew now that I had the strength to face them head on. I was no longer the meek, submissive wife who had let others dictate her fate. I was Elena, a woman who knew her own worth and refused to settle for anything less than she deserved. In the weeks following the confrontation at the block party, I threw myself into my new life with a renewed sense of purpose. I volunteered more at the community center, taking on additional responsibilities and spearheading new projects. It was there that I found a sense of belonging and fulfillment that had been missing from my life for so long. The other volunteers, many of them women my age who had faced their own challenges and triumphs, became a source of strength and support. One afternoon, as I was sorting through donated books for the center's library, I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned to see Clara, Hank's girlfriend, standing in the doorway. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice wary. Clara stepped into the room, her eyes downcast. "I needed to talk to you, Elena, privately." I hesitated for a moment, then nodded, gesturing for her to sit down. Clara perched on the edge of a chair, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "But I need your help." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her words. "My help? With what?" Clara took a deep breath, then spoke in a rush. "Marjorie and Belinda. They're making my life a living hell. Ever since the block party, they've been on a rampage, spreading lies about me and trying to turn Hank against me." I felt a flicker of sympathy for Clara, remembering all too well the pain of being on the receiving end of Marjorie and Belinda's cruelty. But I also couldn't help feeling a sense of vindication, knowing that they were finally getting a taste of their own medicine. "I'm sorry to hear that, Clara," I said carefully. "But what do you expect me to do about it?" Clara leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "I know you have dirt on them, Elena. The things you said at the party about Marjorie betraying her sister. I need you to tell me more. I need leverage to fight back." I sat back in my chair, considering her words. A part of me relished the idea of taking Marjorie and Belinda down a peg, of using their own secrets against them. But another part of me hesitated, knowing that revenge was a slippery slope. "I'll tell you what I know," I said finally. "But on one condition. You use this information to set boundaries and demand respect, not to stoop to their level." Clara nodded eagerly. "Of course, I promise. I just want to be treated fairly, to have a chance at a happy life with Hank." Over the next hour, I told Clara everything I knew about Marjorie's past, about the lies and betrayals that had torn her family apart. I could see the shock and anger on Clara's face as she listened, her hands clenching into fists. When I finished, Clara sat back in her chair, her eyes blazing with determination. "Thank you, Elena," she said softly. "I know this couldn't have been easy for you, dredging up the past like this, but I promise I won't let this information go to waste." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. It felt good to finally unburden myself of the secrets I had been carrying for so long, to know that they could be used for good. In the days that followed, I heard whispers of the changes taking place in Hank's family. Clara had confronted Marjorie and Belinda, armed with the truth about their past. She had demanded respect and set clear boundaries, refusing to be bullied or manipulated any longer. And to my surprise, it seemed to be working. Marjorie and Belinda's hold on the family was weakening, their power diminishing with each passing day. I knew that there would still be challenges ahead, that the scars of the past could never be fully erased. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope and possibility. I had taken back control of my life, and in doing so, I had given others the courage to do the same. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all. As the months passed, I found myself thriving in my new life. The community center had become a second home to me, a place where I could make a real difference in the lives of others. I had started a support group for women who had gone through difficult life transitions, whether it was divorce, widowhood, or simply the challenges of aging. Every week, we would gather in the cozy meeting room, sharing our stories and offering each other support and encouragement. It was during one of these meetings that I met Sarah, a quiet woman in her late 50s who had recently lost her husband to cancer. She had been struggling to find purpose and meaning in her life, feeling lost and alone in the world. As I listened to her story, I felt a deep sense of connection and empathy. I knew all too well the pain of losing a loved one, of feeling like your entire world had been turned upside down. After the meeting, I approached Sarah, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I know it feels like everything is falling apart right now," I said softly, "but I promise you, it won't always be this way. You can always reclaim your life, no matter how hard it seems." Sarah looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "How do you know?" she asked, her voice trembling. I smiled, thinking back on my own journey. "Because I've been where you are. I've felt that same pain, that same sense of hopelessness, but I found a way to keep going, to build a new life for myself. And you can too." Over the next few weeks, I took Sarah under my wing, introducing her to the other volunteers at the community center and helping her find ways to get involved. I watched as she slowly began to come out of her shell, her eyes sparkling with a newfound sense of purpose. One afternoon, as we were sorting through donations together, Sarah turned to me, a smile on her face. "I never thought I'd be able to laugh again," she said. "But being here, with all of you, it's given me a reason to keep going." I felt a surge of pride and happiness, knowing that I had played a small part in Sarah's healing. It was moments like these that made all the struggles and challenges of the past year worth it. As I continued to immerse myself in my community work, I found that my own wounds were slowly beginning to heal as well. The pain of my divorce and the betrayal of my former family would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I had found a new sense of purpose and identity, one that was rooted in service and compassion. I had surrounded myself with people who lifted me up and supported me, rather than tearing me down. Even my relationship with Clara had begun to evolve. We would never be close friends, but we had found a way to coexist peacefully, united in our determination to set boundaries and demand respect. I knew that Hank was still struggling to come to terms with the changes in his life, but I no longer felt responsible for his happiness. I had learned the hard way that I couldn't control other people's actions or choices, but I could control my own. And so, as I looked out at the smiling faces of the women in my support group, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and contentment. I had come so far from the broken, defeated woman I had been just a year ago. I had reclaimed my life, my identity, and my sense of self-worth. I had found a way to turn my pain into purpose, to use my experiences to help others. And as I stood there, surrounded by the warmth and love of my new community, I knew that I had finally found my place in the world. I was no longer just surviving, but truly thriving. The funeral was a small, somber affair. Just a handful of us gathered to say goodbye to my father, Ted Walton. As I stood there, numb with grief, my mother-in-law, Denise, leaned in close. "Gina, life doesn't wait. You have to start thinking about us now," she said coldly. I fought back tears, my heart aching. Am I not allowed to grieve my father quietly? He was the one person who truly understood me, and now he was gone. After the service, the lawyer approached. "Mrs. Davis, your father left you his house in Brooklyn Heights. It's a quaint but valuable property." My husband Mike's eyes lit up. Wow, that's incredible. We could renovate it, make it perfect for my parents and us to live together. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. But I need time. This is all so sudden. Mike squeezed my arm. Of course, dear. We'll discuss it later. As we drove home, Mike couldn't contain his excitement. Just imagine it. A big, beautiful home for all of us. No more dealing with landlords or mortgages. I stared out the window, my mind swirling. Dad's house was my last connection to him. How could I let it go so easily? In the following weeks, the pressure only intensified. Denise and Frank, my father-in-law, seemed to take every opportunity to criticize me. Gina, Mike needs more than just chicken thighs. You must do better for him, Denise snapped one night as I served dinner. Frank eyed the meal dismissively. A cheap steak? After his hard day at work, Mike deserves a proper meal. I bit my tongue, feeling their disapproval like a weight on my shoulders. Mike just shrugged, siding with his parents as usual. Then one afternoon, I came home to a jarring sight: construction vehicles outside Dad's house. A contractor approached me confused. Mrs. Davis, your husband approved these renovations. We're just following orders. My heart dropped. Renovations? I never agreed to any of this. I stormed inside, confronting Mike. He tried to play it off casually. It's for the best, Gina. We're making this place our dream home. Tears stung my eyes. Our dream home? This was my father's house, Mike. How could you do this without even consulting me? His face hardened. If you can't accept my parents living with us, then we're through. It's that simple. I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me. After everything Dad had given me, was I really going to let his memory be tarnished like this? Clenching my fists, I met Mike's gaze. I won't be manipulated anymore. This house is about my father's legacy, and I'm going to protect it, with or without you. As I walked out that day, I knew my life would never be the same. But in that moment, all I could feel was a fierce determination to honor the man who had given me so much strength. After walking out on Mike that day, I felt adrift. My marriage was crumbling, and I had nowhere to go. Thankfully, an old friend of my father's, Paul Hendricks, offered me a lifeline. Gina, you're welcome to stay with me until you get back on your feet, Paul said warmly, ushering me into his modest apartment. As I settled in, Paul's calming presence reminded me so much of Dad. He had been Dad's confidant for years, and now I desperately needed that wisdom. Paul, what am I going to do? I asked, feeling the weight of my situation. Mike has turned Dad's house into a battleground. Paul placed a reassuring hand on my arm. That house is yours, Gina. No one can take that away from you. We'll figure this out together. Over the next few days, Paul and I pored over documents and legal papers, formulating a plan. My determination grew as the path ahead became clearer. Your father wanted that house to be a sanctuary, a place of peace, Paul reminded me. We'll make sure it serves that purpose in his memory. Finally, I was ready to confront Mike and his parents. Paul had secured a meeting at the house, saying it was time for an open discussion about its future. The tension was palpable as Denise, Frank, and Mike arrived. Mike shot me a resentful glare, but I stood my ground, Paul by my side. You had no right to make those decisions about my inheritance, I stated firmly. This house is part of my father's legacy, and I have a plan to honor that. Denise's face contorted in rage. You ungrateful, selfish girl, after everything we've done for you? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. What you've done is try to take control, with no regard for Dad's wishes. Well, it ends now. To my surprise, Mike spoke up, his voice dripping with disdain. So you're just going to throw us out, your own family? If that's what it takes to protect what's rightfully mine, then yes, I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. This is the last time I'll be bullied or manipulated by any of you. Paul stepped forward. I'm afraid you've left us no choice. We have the legal documentation to take over the property immediately. I suggest you make arrangements to leave. Denise opened her mouth to protest, but Frank silenced her with a defeated shake of his head. As they turned to leave, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. It was over. I had won. In the weeks that followed, Paul and I worked tirelessly to bring my vision for the house to life. We renovated and refurbished, creating a warm, welcoming space that embodied Dad's generous spirit. He would be so proud of you, Gina, Paul said as we stood in the newly revived garden. You've turned this place into something truly special. I smiled, feeling the warm breeze on my face. I just hope I've honored his memory and shown the strength he instilled in me. As the grand opening day arrived for the new community center, I knew Dad was there in spirit, surrounding me with the serenity he had always provided. It was the first day of my new life, a life of freedom and peace, just as he would have wanted. In the weeks following my confrontation with Mike and his parents, daily life became increasingly tense. Denise and Frank seemed determined to make me miserable, criticizing my every move. "Gina, Mike needs more than just chicken thighs for dinner," Denise snapped one evening as I served our modest meal. "You must do better for him." I bit my tongue, refusing to engage. But Frank piled on with a dismissive glance at the food. "A cheap steak? After his hard day at work, Mike deserves a proper meal." Mike remained silent as usual, siding with his parents through his passivity. I felt utterly alone, isolated in my own home. The constant barrage of demands and insults wore me down. No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough for Denise and Frank. They seemed hell-bent on dominating every aspect of our lives. One evening, as I cleared the dinner plates, Denise fixed me with a cold stare. "You know, Gina, we're not getting any younger. We'll need to start discussing living arrangements soon." My heart sank. I knew exactly what she was implying, moving into my father's house in Brooklyn Heights. I need more time," I stammered, feeling trapped. "That house means so much to me. It was Dad's." Frank scoffed. "Ted's gone now. It's time to start thinking practically about our future as a family." Mike finally spoke up, his voice laced with irritation. "They're right, Gina. We can't keep putting this off. My parents need a permanent place to live, and that house is the perfect solution." I wanted to scream. How could he be so callous about my father's memory? But I knew any protest would be met with more criticism, more demands. In the following days, the tension only escalated. Denise and Frank seemed to take every opportunity to remind me of my supposed failings as a wife and daughter-in-law. "Did you even dust today, Gina?" Denise would sneer, running a finger along a surface. "This place is a pigsty." Frank would chime in with his own jabs. "No wonder Mike comes home so stressed. This environment is unbearable." Through it all, Mike remained infuriatingly passive, letting his parents dictate the narrative of our lives. I felt like I was slowly suffocating, drowning in their constant belittlement. Finally, one fateful afternoon, I returned home to a shocking sight: construction vehicles outside my father's house. A contractor approached me, confused. "Mrs. Davis, your husband approved these renovations. We're just following orders." My heart dropped to my stomach. "Renovations? I never agreed to any of this." I stormed inside, confronting Mike. He tried to play it off casually, but I could see the smug satisfaction in his eyes. "It's for the best, Gina. We're making this place our dream home, just like we discussed." Tears stung my eyes as I realized the profound breach of trust. "Our dream home? This was my father's house, Mike. How could you do this without even consulting me?" His face hardened, and I saw a glimpse of the true man he had become. Selfish, entitled, devoid of empathy. "If you can't accept my parents living with us, then we're through," he stated coldly. "It's that simple." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. My marriage was a sham, my autonomy stripped away piece by piece. But I wouldn't be a victim anymore. Clenching my fists, I met Mike's gaze with a newfound strength. "I won't be manipulated anymore. This house is about my father's legacy, and I'm going to protect it, with or without you." As I walked out that day, I knew there was no turning back. But for the first time in years, I felt free, ready to reclaim the life my father had wanted for me. After I stormed out of my father's home in a fit of anger, I found myself wandering aimlessly through the city streets. The crisp night air provided little solace as I grappled with the profound betrayal I had endured. Mike's callous disregard for my feelings had cut me deeply. Eventually, I made my way to Paul's apartment, the one place I felt I could find refuge. As I stepped inside, a wave of calm washed over me, a momentary escape from the turmoil raging within. I sank into the familiar comfort of his worn armchair, allowing the anger and hurt to slowly subside. In that moment of quiet, I found myself haunted by the sickening realization that my husband had so brazenly violated my trust. How could he have authorized such drastic changes to Dad's cherished home without my consent? The sting of that betrayal burned fiercely, fueling my indignation. As the hours ticked by, I pictured Mike's smug satisfaction as he oversaw the destruction of that sacred space, the desecration of Dad's memory. My fury mounted as I imagined his callous disregard for my feelings, his selfish disrespect for all that Dad had left me. The man had no shame, no regard for the sanctity of that connection to my father. In that moment, I resolved to sever that final tie to him, to cut that last cord binding me to his contempt. I would not allow his arrogance to further defile Dad's legacy, to strip me of that precious link to the man who had given me so much. I would reclaim my dignity, my self-respect, by severing that final thread. With a renewed sense of purpose, I rose from the chair, determined to preserve that last remnant of my father's spirit. I would not permit Mike's callous disregard to taint that final bond, that last connection to the man who had nurtured me, who had shaped my character. I would not allow his scorn to further diminish my sense of self. With a steadying breath, I made my way to the small alcove where I kept my few cherished possessions from Dad. There, nestled in a worn leather case, was the small token of his affection, the simple memento of his love, the antique fountain pen he had given me on my 16th birthday. I grasped the smooth, polished surface, feeling the familiar curve of the nib against my fingertips, and began to chronicle my resolve, my determination to preserve that final connection to the man who had meant so much. In the days following my confrontation with Mike, I found myself adrift, untethered from the life I had once known. The decision to leave my husband had been agonizing, but I knew in my heart it was the only path forward. I could no longer subject myself to his manipulation, his blatant disregard for my autonomy. As I settled into the modest apartment Paul had offered me, I felt a strange sense of calm amidst the turmoil. This space, though unfamiliar, represented a clean slate, a chance to rebuild my life on my own terms, free from the toxic influence of Mike and his overbearing parents. Yet, even as I sought to move forward, the sting of Mike's betrayal lingered. The image of my father's house, that sacred space now defiled by his selfish renovations, haunted me. How could he have so callously disregarded my wishes, my connection to Dad's memory? In those quiet moments alone, I found myself wrestling with a burning sense of injustice. Mike had not only violated my trust, but had trampled upon the very essence of what Dad had left me, a sanctuary, a place of serenity and refuge. His actions had desecrated that final link to the man who had shaped me, who had instilled in me the values of integrity and respect. As the days turned to weeks, that simmering indignation began to crystallize into a fierce determination. I would not allow Mike's selfish ambitions to rob me of my father's legacy. That house, that cherished space, belonged to me, and I would reclaim it no matter the cost. It was during one of my frequent visits with Paul that the pieces began to fall into place. As we pored over the legal documents surrounding the inheritance, he placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "Gina, this house is yours, and yours alone. No one, not even Mike, can take that away from you." His words resonated deeply, reigniting the spark of defiance that had been smoldering within me. I met his gaze, my jaw set with newfound resolve. "You're right, Paul. It's time to protect what my father entrusted to me, to honor his memory in the way he would have wanted." From that moment on, a plan began to take shape. With Paul's guidance and unwavering support, I would navigate the legal intricacies, building an ironclad case to wrest control of the house from Mike's grasp. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, confrontations that would test the very limits of my resilience. But I was ready, fortified by the knowledge that I was fighting for something greater than myself. A sacred bond with the man who had given me life, the man whose values had shaped the core of my being. As I looked ahead to the impending battle, a sense of clarity washed over me. This was about more than just a house. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-worth. I would emerge from this crucible stronger, tempered by the fire of my convictions. And when the dust finally settled, I vowed that house would stand as a testament to my father's legacy, a beacon of resilience and unwavering love, shining through the darkness that had once threatened to consume me. In the weeks following my decision to leave Mike, I found solace in the company of an unexpected ally, Paul Hendricks, one of my father's oldest friends. As I settled into the modest apartment he had offered me, Paul's calming presence reminded me so much of Dad. "You know, Gina, Your father spoke of you often, Paul said one evening as we sipped tea in his cozy living room. He was immensely proud of the woman you've become. I felt a lump form in my throat at the mention of Dad. I just wish he could see me now, Paul. I feel so lost without his guidance. Paul reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on mine. Ted may be gone, but his spirit lives on in you. And that house he left you? It's a part of his legacy, his final gift. My thoughts turned to the Brooklyn Heights home, now tainted by Mike's selfish renovations. A pang of sadness washed over me, quickly replaced by a simmering anger. That's just it, Paul. Mike has desecrated everything Dad stood for with that place. He's turned it into a battlefield, all for his own gain. Paul's eyes narrowed, a determined glint flickering behind his glasses. Then we'll take it back, Gina. That house belongs to you, and no one can take that away. In the days that followed, Paul and I pored over legal documents, meticulously building a case to reclaim my inheritance. With each strategy session, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a fire igniting within me. Your father trusted you with that home for a reason, Paul reminded me. It's time to protect what he entrusted to you, to honor his memory in the way he would have wanted. Those words resonated deep within me, echoing the same resilience and strength that Dad had instilled from an early age. I was my father's daughter, imbued with his unwavering spirit. As our plan took shape, I found myself channeling that inner fortitude, drawing strength from the memories of Dad's unwavering love and support. This was about more than just a house. It was a battle to preserve his legacy, to ensure that the values he had imparted would endure. Finally, the day arrived for our first legal maneuver, a formal letter demanding that Mike and his parents vacate the premises immediately. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as Paul and I made our way to the house, each step fueled by a sense of righteous determination. When Mike answered the door, his expression quickly shifted from confusion to outright contempt. Gina? What is this nonsense? I steeled myself, meeting his gaze with an unwavering resolve. This nonsense is me taking back what's rightfully mine. You had no right to make those decisions about my inheritance, Mike. This house is a part of my father's legacy, and I won't let you defile it any longer. As the words left my lips, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The shackles of Mike's manipulation, of his parents' toxic influence, began to loosen their grip. Mike's face contorted in anger, but before he could respond, Paul stepped forward, brandishing the legal documents like a sword. I suggest you heed this notice, Michael. We have taken all necessary steps to ensure Gina's rightful claim to this property. Any further resistance will only compound the consequences you face. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was prepared to fight with every ounce of my being. This was about more than just a house. It was about reclaiming my autonomy, my self-worth. And with Paul's steadfast support, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, emboldened by the knowledge that I was honoring my father's most sacred gift. With Paul's steadfast support and guidance, the wheels were set in motion to reclaim what was rightfully mine, my father's cherished home in Brooklyn Heights. Yet, even as our legal strategy took shape, I knew the true battle would be far more personal, a confrontation I had been both dreading and anticipating. It was Paul who suggested we arrange a family dinner at the house, a final opportunity to resolve the matter civilly before escalating our efforts. Though apprehensive, I agreed, recognizing that this might be my last chance to appeal to whatever shred of decency still resided within Mike and his parents. The tension was palpable the moment they arrived, their expressions a mix of confusion and thinly veiled contempt. Denise, ever the antagonist, wasted no time in voicing her displeasure. "Just what is the meaning of this, Gina?" she sneered, her eyes narrowing. "We don't have time for your games." I took a deep breath, steadying myself as Paul gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "This is no game, Denise," I stated firmly. "You all had no right to make those decisions about my inheritance. This house is a part of my father's legacy, and I have a plan to honor that in a way he would have wanted." Mike scoffed, his disdain evident. "Your plan? Don't be ridiculous, Gina. This is our future we're talking about." "No, Mike," I countered, my voice unwavering. "This is about preserving what my father entrusted to me, what he wanted to leave behind for generations to come." Denise's face contorted in rage, and for a moment I thought she might explode. "You ungrateful, selfish girl, after everything we've done for you?" I felt Paul tense beside me, but I remained resolute, drawing strength from the memory of my father's unwavering spirit. "What you've done is try to take control, with no regard for Dad's wishes," I stated, meeting Denise's fiery gaze. "Well, it ends now. This house will become what it was always meant to be, a sanctuary, a place of peace and community, just as Dad envisioned." Frank, ever the passive observer, opened his mouth to protest, but I raised my hand, silencing him. "I've already taken the necessary legal steps to assume full ownership of this property. Any further resistance on your part will only lead to consequences none of us want." Mike's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched in barely contained fury. "So, you're just going to throw us out? Your own family?" I matched his stare, unflinching. "If that's what it takes to protect what's rightfully mine, then yes, this is the last time I'll be bullied or manipulated by any of you." An uneasy silence fell over the room, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Finally, it was Denise who broke the tension, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "How dare you? After everything we've sacrificed for this family?" Paul stepped forward, his presence commanding respect. "I'm afraid you've left us no choice. We have the legal documentation to take over the property immediately. I suggest you make arrangements to leave." For a moment, it seemed as though Denise might unleash the full force of her fury, but Frank placed a hand on her arm, silencing her with a weary shake of his head. As they turned to leave, Mike lingered, his gaze filled with a potent mix of resentment and defeat. "You'll regret this, Gina," he spat venomously. "Mark my words." But as I watched them depart, I felt no regret, only a profound sense of relief and vindication. The shackles of their manipulation had finally been severed, and I was free to chart my own course, to honor the legacy my father had bestowed upon me. In the days and weeks that followed, Paul and I worked tirelessly to bring my vision for the house to life. We renovated and refurbished, creating a warm, welcoming space that embodied Dad's generous spirit and love for community. And as the grand opening day arrived, I knew Dad was there in spirit, surrounding me with the same serenity he had always provided. This was more than just a house. It was a living, breathing testament to his values, a sanctuary where his memory would endure for generations to come. The day of the grand opening arrived with a sense of nervous anticipation. As I stood in the newly renovated garden, taking in the vibrant blooms and meticulously landscaped paths, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride and accomplishment. This space, once tainted by Mike's selfish ambitions, had been transformed into a living embodiment of Dad's spirit, a sanctuary of peace and community, just as he would have wanted. The countless hours of hard work, the battles fought and won, had all led to this moment. "You've outdone yourself, Gina." Paul's warm voice broke through my reverie. He moved to stand beside me, his eyes shining with pride. "Your father would be in awe of what you've created here." I felt a lump form in my throat, overwhelmed by the weight of Dad's legacy. "I just hope I've honored his memory in the way he deserved, Paul. This place means everything to me." Paul placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Have no doubt, my dear. You've turned this house into something truly remarkable, a living testament to Ted's generous spirit." As the first guests began to arrive, I felt a surge of nervous energy coursing through me. This was it, the moment I had fought so hard for, the culmination of a journey that had tested the very limits of my resilience. Yet, as I greeted each visitor with a warm smile, I was struck by the overwhelming sense of community and camaraderie that permeated the air. These were Dad's people, the neighbors and friends, who had embraced his kindness and compassion over the years. One by one, they approached me, offering heartfelt congratulations and sharing cherished memories of the man who had touched so many lives. "Your father was a true gem, Gina," Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor, said with a misty-eyed smile. "He always had a kind word and a helping hand for anyone in need." Mr. Rodriguez, the local grocer, chimed in with a hearty laugh. "Remember when he organized that neighborhood cleanup day? Ted had us all out there bright and early, picking up trash like a bunch of kids on detention." As the anecdotes flowed, I found myself transported back to the simpler times of my childhood, when Dad's unwavering presence had been the bedrock of my world. Each story, Each recollection was a precious thread woven into the tapestry of his legacy. As the day wore on, the garden became a vibrant hub of activity, filled with the laughter of children and the warm embraces of old friends. I moved among the crowd, basking in the joy and sense of belonging that Dad had always fostered. It was in those moments that I truly understood the profound impact he had made, not just on my life, but on an entire community. This place, this sanctuary, was a living embodiment of his values: generosity, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to bringing people together. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the garden, I found myself standing in a quiet corner, taking in the scene with a sense of profound gratitude. Dad's spirit was alive and thriving here, a testament to the power of one man's unwavering love and compassion. "Dad, I hope you're proud," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "This is for you, a legacy that will endure for generations to come." And in that moment I could have sworn I felt his presence, a gentle breeze caressing my cheek, carrying with it the familiar scent of his cologne. A subtle reminder that he was never truly gone, but lived on in the hearts and lives of those he had touched. As Paul approached, his eyes shining with pride, I knew that my journey had reached its ultimate destination, a place of healing, redemption, and an unbreakable connection to the man who had shaped me into the woman I had become. "You did it, Gina," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "You turned this place into something beautiful, a living embodiment of everything your father stood for." And as I looked around at the joyous scene unfolding before me, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same resilience and grace that Dad had instilled in me. For this was his true legacy, a gift that would continue to nurture and inspire long after I was gone. I pulled up to the house I had called home for over 30 years, and my heart sank. The familiar colonial-style facade was gone, replaced by sleek modern lines and a fresh coat of gray paint. A massive for sale sign stood defiantly on the perfectly manicured lawn. "Dennis, what's going on? I didn't authorize this!" I exclaimed as he emerged from the front door, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Relax, Maggie. You should have been here. Now it's out of our hands," he replied dismissively, waving a hand towards the renovated property. My mind raced, trying to process the jarring changes. This was my family's home, filled with memories and history. How could he make such drastic decisions without consulting me? As I stepped inside, the gut punch intensified. Gone were the warm, familiar tones and furnishings I had carefully curated over the years. In their place, a stark, minimalist design that felt cold and unwelcoming. "Mom's been a godsend overseeing the whole project," Dennis said, his tone almost mocking. "She knows what's best for us." There she was, my mother-in-law Joan, surveying the transformed space with a self-satisfied smirk. "It was time for an update, Maggie. This place was stuck in the past, just like you." Her words stung, but I bit my tongue. After months of caring for my ailing parents, I didn't have the energy for another battle with Joan's passive-aggressive jabs. "Where are my things?" I asked, dreading the answer. "We had to make room for the new look," Joan replied dismissively. "Don't worry, we kept a few sentimental pieces in storage." Storage? My stomach churned at the thought of my cherished belongings, collected over a lifetime, carelessly packed away. As I wandered through the hollow, unfamiliar rooms, an overwhelming sense of betrayal washed over me. This was no longer my home. It was a staged set, stripped of warmth and soul. In the kitchen, I found Dennis poring over paperwork with a young, attractive woman I didn't recognize. They looked up, their expressions a mixture of surprise and guilt. "Maggie, you're back early," Dennis stammered. "This is Sarah, our realtor. She's been invaluable in getting the house ready for market." Sarah extended a perfectly manicured hand, her smile saccharine sweet. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Margaret. Dennis has told me so much about you." I forced a tight smile, my mind reeling. Ready for market? They were selling my family's home without my consent? As Sarah droned on about staging and curb appeal, I tuned her out, my gaze fixed on Dennis. His eyes averted mine, and in that moment, I realized the depth of his deception. This wasn't just about the house. It was a calculated betrayal, orchestrated by Dennis and enabled by his ever-controlling mother. A cold, sinking feeling gripped me as I recognized the true extent of how little they valued my input or respected my place in this family. I had been naive, blind to the cracks forming in the foundation of my life. But now, the veil had been lifted, and I saw the harsh reality staring back at me. This was no longer my home. It was a battlefield, and I would have to fight to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I sat numbly on the edge of the bed in the guest room, my mind replaying the events of the day like a broken record. How could Dennis do this to me, to us? After 30 years of marriage, of building a life together, he had thrown it all away without a second thought. As the shock began to subside, a familiar ache settled in my chest, the dull ache of disappointment I had grown accustomed to over the years. I should have seen the signs, the subtle shifts in his behavior that I had chosen to ignore, desperate to cling to the illusion of the perfect family. Dennis had always been distant, more focused on his work and hobbies than on cultivating our relationship. But I had foolishly believed that was just his way, that deep down he still loved and cherished me. Now the truth was laid bare. I had simply been a convenient accessory in his life, easily discarded when something shinier came along. And Joan, my own mother-in-law, the woman who should have been my closest ally, had been the architect of this betrayal all along. Her constant belittling, her snide remarks about my capabilities as a wife and mother, they had all been carefully calculated jabs, chipping away at my self-worth until I was too broken to fight back. Tears stung my eyes as I remembered the countless times I had defended her to my own family, making excuses for her behavior. She's just old-fashioned, I would say. She means well, deep down. But the truth was, Joan had never accepted me as part of her family. To her, I was an interloper, a threat to the twisted, codependent bond she shared with her son. The sound of laughter from downstairs snapped me back to reality. Dennis and Joan, celebrating their victory over me, no doubt reveling in the spoils of their deception. My fists clenched involuntarily, a surge of anger replacing the sadness that had consumed me moments before. I thought of my parents, the way their faces had lit up when Dennis and I had first brought them to this house, our forever home. They had trusted him, believed in the life we were building together, and now their legacy, the home they had gifted us out of love, was being sold off like a piece of merchandise, all for Dennis's selfish gain. A renewed sense of determination washed over me. I would not let them win. Not this time. Rising from the bed, I began to gather my things, my mind already formulating a plan. First, I needed evidence, proof of Dennis's misdeeds that not even Joan could deny or spin in her favor. Then, I would rally my troops, the friends and family who had stood by me through thick and thin, the ones who had always seen through Joan's false pretenses. This was war, and I would fight with everything I had to reclaim what was rightfully mine, my home, my dignity, my life. Dennis and Joan had made the mistake of underestimating me, of believing I would simply roll over and accept their betrayal. Well, they were in for a rude awakening. As I zipped up my suitcase, a small, defiant smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready to show them just how strong I could be when pushed to my limits. This was only the beginning. I stared at the suitcase on the bed, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts and emotions. Part of me wanted nothing more than to flee, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the toxic web of lies that had ensnared my life. But another part, the part that had been beaten down and gaslit for years, hesitated. Could I really just walk away from everything I had built? A familiar voice in the back of my mind whispered insidiously, "This is your fault, Maggie. If you had been a better wife, a better daughter-in-law, none of this would have happened." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to drown out the voice that sounded eerily like Joan's. That wretched woman had spent decades chipping away at my self-worth, always quick with a backhanded compliment or subtle jab about my shortcomings. And Dennis, my so-called partner, had stood idly by, letting her toxic influence fester until it had poisoned our entire relationship. Flashes of memory assaulted me, moments I had tried so hard to forget. Joan criticizing my cooking at family dinners, her thin lips curled in a perpetual sneer. Dennis brushing off my concerns about her behavior, insisting I was overreacting, the way she had swooped in like a vulture when my parents fell ill, insinuating that I was an ungrateful daughter for needing to care for them. "If you cared enough about your own family, you wouldn't leave for months, Maggie," she had said, her voice dripping with false concern. At the time, I had bitten my tongue, too overwhelmed by the situation to stand up for myself. But now the memory ignited a spark of defiance deep within me. How dare she question my devotion to my family when she had spent years actively undermining and sabotaging my relationships? I thought of my parents, their faces etched with worry as I had left to tend to their recovery. They had trusted Dennis, believed that he would support me through that difficult time. Little did they know, he had used my absence as an opportunity to further his own selfish agenda, aided and abetted by his manipulative mother. A renewed sense of determination washed over me. I would not let them win. Not this time. If Dennis and Joan wanted a war, then a war they would get. Zipping up the suitcase with a decisive tug, I squared my shoulders and headed for the door. There would be no more running, no more hiding. It was time to gather my troops and fight for what was rightfully mine. My home, my family, my life. As I descended the stairs, I could hear Joan's shrill voice echoing from the kitchen, no doubt berating Dennis for his latest failure. A small, grim smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. They had no idea what was coming. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, taking a deep breath to steady myself. Then, with a newfound sense of purpose, I strode towards the kitchen, ready to face my adversaries head-on. No more Mrs. Nice Maggie. It was time to take back control of my life, no matter what it took. I strode into the kitchen, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and determination. There they were, Dennis and Joan, seated at the table like a pair of co-conspirators, their expressions a blend of smugness and disdain. Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter-in-law," Joan sneered, her thin lips curling into a familiar sneer, "to what do we owe the pleasure of your presence?" Before I could respond, Dennis cut in, his voice dripping with condescension. "You have no idea what we've been through, managing everything you abandoned." He gestured broadly at the newly renovated space around us. "We had to take matters into our own hands." I felt my hands ball into fists at my sides as I surveyed the changes they had made to my home. Our home. Gone were the warm, inviting tones and cherished family heirlooms I had carefully curated over the years. In their place, a cold, sterile aesthetic that felt utterly devoid of personality or sentiment. "Where are my things?" I demanded, fighting to keep my voice steady. Joan waved a dismissive hand. "We need to move on, Maggie. This house isn't yours to hold us back any longer." Her words hit me like a physical blow, and in that moment the full weight of their betrayal crashed over me like a tidal wave. They had not only disrespected me, but they had desecrated the very legacy my parents had entrusted to us, the home they had gifted us out of love and trust. Rage bubbled up from deep within me, a primal, visceral fury that I had never experienced before. How dare they? How dare they trample on everything that was sacred, everything that had once been so precious to our family? "You had no right," I seethed, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. "This was never just your decision to make." Dennis scoffed, leaning back in his chair with an infuriating air of nonchalance. "Don't be so dramatic, Maggie. It's just a house. We're doing what's best for our future." "Our future?" I echoed incredulously. "Or yours, Dennis? Yours and that little tramp you've been sneaking around with?" His eyes widened, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of fear cross his features. Joan, however, remained unmoved, her expression hardening into a mask of cold indifference. "So you figured it out," she said coolly. "I must say I'm surprised it took you this long. You were always a bit slow on the uptake, weren't you, dear?" Her words were like a slap in the face, but I refused to let her see how deeply they stung. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and met her icy gaze head-on. "It's time you realized, Maggie, that you were never truly part of this family," she continued, her voice laced with venom. "You were always an outsider, a mere accessory to be tolerated for Dennis's sake." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. The years of subtle jabs and undermining, the way they had so easily cast me aside the moment I became an inconvenience, it had all been part of their twisted game, a slow, methodical erosion of my sense of self-worth and belonging. But no more. I would not be their victim, their punching bag, any longer. "You're wrong, Joan," I said, my voice steady and resolute. This family, this legacy, it's mine just as much as it is yours, and I'll be damned if I let you destroy it for your own selfish gains. Dennis opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him with a single withering glare. Don't bother, Dennis. The lies end here. I know everything. About your affair, about the way you've been squandering my inheritance to fund your mistress's little business ventures. It's all going to come out, one way or another. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in Joan's eyes, a crack in her carefully constructed facade of indifference. She knew, deep down, that I had finally found the strength to fight back, and that terrified her more than anything. A small, triumphant smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. The battle lines had been drawn, and for once I held the upper hand. This was only the beginning of their reckoning. The smug looks on Dennis and Joan's faces quickly faded as the weight of my words sank in. I could see the fear flickering in their eyes, the realization that I was no longer the meek, compliant woman they had grown accustomed to controlling. How did you find out? Dennis sputtered, his bravado crumbling under the intensity of my gaze. Did you really think you could keep it all a secret forever? I scoffed. The shady financial dealings, the late nights at the office, it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. Joan's expression hardened, her lips pressing into a thin, disapproving line. So you've been snooping through our affairs, have you? How typical of you, Maggie, to resort to such underhanded tactics. I leveled my gaze at her, refusing to be cowed by her condescending tone. Don't try to play the victim here, Joan. You're just as guilty as Dennis in all of this. Turning to my husband, I felt a surge of disgust and betrayal rise up within me. How could you do this to me, Dennis? To our family? After everything we've been through together, how could you throw it all away for her? The words tumbled out before I could stop them, the hurt and anger I had bottled up for so long finally spilling over. Was I not enough for you? Did our marriage, our vows mean nothing to you? Dennis opened his mouth, but I held up a hand, silencing him. No, don't bother trying to explain it away. I know all about your little fling with Sarah, the real estate agent you've been using to funnel my inheritance into her business ventures. Joan's eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of genuine surprise cross her features. Clearly, even she hadn't been privy to the full extent of Dennis's deception. That's right, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. I know about the shady deals, the secret accounts, all of it. And I have proof. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out a thick manila envelope stuffed with financial records, copies of incriminating emails, and other damning evidence I had painstakingly gathered over the past few weeks. You see, while you two were busy plotting behind my back, I was doing a little digging of my own. And what I found was a web of lies and betrayal that goes deeper than I ever could have imagined. Dennis's face had drained of color, his eyes darting nervously between me and the envelope in my hands. Joan, however, remained stubbornly defiant, her chin jutting out in a show of false bravado. So what? She sneered. You have a few pieces of paper. That doesn't change the fact that you were never truly part of this family, Maggie. You were always an outsider, a mere accessory to be tolerated for Dennis's sake. Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see how much they stung. Instead, I met her gaze head-on, my resolve unwavering. You're wrong, Joan, I said, my voice steady and resolute. This family, this legacy, it's mine just as much as it is yours, and I'll be damned if I let you destroy it for your own selfish gains. A heavy silence hung in the air, the weight of my words settling over us like a thick fog. For a moment, it seemed as though time itself had frozen, the three of us locked in a silent battle of wills. Then, without warning, Joan's composure cracked. Her face contorted into a mask of rage, and she slammed her fist down on the table with surprising force. How dare you? She spat, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? With accusations and threats? I held her gaze, unflinching. I'm not threatening anyone, Joan. I'm simply stating the facts. And the fact is, you and Dennis have betrayed me in the worst possible way. But it ends here, today. No more lies, no more secrets. Turning to Dennis, I felt a pang of sadness mixed with resolve. I loved you, Dennis. Truly, I did. But this... I gestured around the cold, sterile room that had once been our warm, inviting home. This is too much. You've crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. His eyes pleaded with me, silently begging for forgiveness, but I had made up my mind. There was no going back, not after everything that had happened. It's over, I said, my voice heavy with finality. The life we had, the dreams we shared, it's all gone, Dennis, and you have no one to blame but yourself. With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving them to stew in the wreckage of their own making. It was time to start anew, to rebuild my life on my own terms, without the constant weight of their manipulation and betrayal holding me back. As I stepped out into the crisp evening air, a sense of liberation washed over me. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free, and I would savor every moment of it. The weight of Dennis and Joan's betrayal hung heavy on my shoulders as I left the house that had once been my home. But even in the depths of my anger and hurt, a newfound sense of determination burned within me. I would not let them break me, not after everything they had put me through. My first stop was the storage unit where Joan had so carelessly stashed away my belongings. As I rifled through the haphazardly packed boxes, a wave of emotion washed over me. These weren't just material possessions. They were pieces of my life, memories and mementos that had been so callously discarded. Gently, I lifted out a faded photograph, its edges worn and creased from years of handling. It was a picture of my parents on their wedding day, beaming with joy and hope for the future that lay ahead of them. A lump formed in my throat as I traced the outline of their faces, my heart aching for the trust they had placed in Dennis, a trust he had so thoroughly shattered. Tucking the photograph safely into my bag, I continued my search, unearthing more treasures from the past. Old love letters from Dennis, souvenirs from our travels, even the tattered stuffed bear he had won for me at a carnival on our first date. Each item was a poignant reminder of the love we had once shared, a love that had been slowly poisoned by Joan's insidious influence and Dennis's own selfishness. But amidst the pain and heartache, a newfound sense of resolve took root within me. These mementos were not just reminders of what I had lost. They were proof of the life I had built, the sacrifices I had made, and the strength that had carried me through even the darkest of times. With a renewed sense of purpose, I began to gather the evidence I would need to expose Dennis and Joan's lies. Financial records, incriminating emails, anything that could shed light on the depth of their betrayal. As I pored over the documents, a clearer picture began to emerge, one of greed, manipulation, and utter disregard for the sanctity of our marriage. It was then that I knew what I had to do. I would not simply walk away and lick my wounds. No, I would fight back, rallying the support of those who had stood by me through thick and thin, those who had seen the truth of Dennis and Joan's actions long before I had been willing to open my eyes. One by one, I reached out to my closest friends and family members, laying bare the painful truth of what had transpired. And one by one, they rallied to my side, offering not just their sympathy, but their unwavering support and loyalty. I always knew there was something off about that woman, my oldest friend Beth spat, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. Just say the word, Maggie, and I'll make sure the whole town knows what kind of snakes they really are. Others echoed her sentiments, sharing their own stories of Joan's manipulative behavior and Dennis's increasingly erratic actions. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and suddenly, the pieces all fell into place. I've been naive, yes, I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. But underestimating me is their biggest mistake. As the days passed, my network of allies grew stronger, each person bringing their own unique perspective and insights to the table. Together we pieced together a damning portrait of Dennis and Joan's misdeeds, a tapestry of lies and deceit that would be impossible to ignore or refute. And through it all, a newfound sense of strength and resilience took root within me. I was no longer the meek, downtrodden woman who had allowed herself to be controlled and belittled for far too long. No, I was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had reclaimed her power and her sense of self-worth. As I looked around at the faces of those who had rallied to my side, I felt a surge of gratitude and determination. This was no longer just about me. It was about standing up for what was right, about refusing to let the toxic influence of people like Joan and Dennis poison the lives of others. With a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and turned to face the battle ahead. It was time to take the fight to them, to expose their lies and their betrayal for all the world to see. And this time I would not be silenced or cowed. This time I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. As I stood before the gathered crowd of family and friends, a hush fell over the room, all eyes fixed on me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies fluttering in my stomach. "I know there have been rumors circulating, whispers of discord within our family, and today I'm going to lay bare the truth, no matter how painful it may be." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but I pressed on, undeterred. For too long I've been a victim of manipulation and betrayal at the hands of those closest to me. My own husband, Dennis, and his mother, Joan, have conspired against me, trampling on the sanctity of our marriage and our family for their own selfish gains. Gasps of shock and disbelief echoed through the room, but I refused to falter. This was my moment, my chance to reclaim the dignity and respect that had been so cruelly stripped away from me. "It's true," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "Dennis has been carrying on an affair with a younger woman, using my own inheritance to fund her business ventures behind my back." Turning to face my husband, I felt a surge of righteous anger coursing through my veins. "How could you, Dennis? How could you betray everything we built together, everything we sacrificed for this family?" He opened his mouth to speak, but I silenced him with a single, withering glare. "And you, Joan," I said, shifting my gaze to my mother-in-law's stony expression. "You were supposed to be my ally, my support system. Instead, you enabled and encouraged Dennis's betrayal, driven by your own twisted, possessive love for your son." Joan's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a familiar sneer. "How dare you speak to me like that, you ungrateful little—" "Enough," I thundered, cutting her off mid-sentence. "I've endured your insults, your belittling, for far too long, but no more. This house, this legacy, it isn't yours to destroy. It's my blood, sweat, and tears you've trampled on, all for your own selfish desires." A heavy silence hung in the air, the weight of my words sinking in for all to bear witness. I could see the shock and disbelief etched on the faces of those around me, the realization that the perfect family they had envied was nothing but a carefully constructed facade. "I have proof," I continued, holding up the thick manila envelope that contained the damning evidence of Dennis and Joan's misdeeds. Financial records, emails, photographs, all of it documenting the depths of their betrayal. Slowly, I began to circulate the documents, allowing each person to see for themselves the ugly truth that had been hidden for so long. Whispers and gasps of outrage rippled through the crowd, and I knew in that moment that the tide had turned. Dennis stepped forward, his eyes pleading with me for forgiveness. "Maggie, please, let me explain." But I cut him off with a sharp shake of my head. "There's nothing to explain, Dennis. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." Turning back to the crowd, I drew myself up to my full height, a newfound sense of strength and resolve coursing through my veins. "This is not the end," I declared, my voice ringing out with conviction. "This is just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I reclaim my dignity, my self-worth, and my rightful place in this family." A smattering of applause broke out, growing louder and more fervent as the weight of my words sank in. I could see the respect and admiration in their eyes, a stark contrast to the pity and condescension I had grown so accustomed to. In that moment, I knew that I had won. Not just a battle, but a war against the toxic influences that had sought to diminish and control me for far too long. As I looked around at the faces of those who had rallied to my side, I felt a surge of gratitude and pride. This was my family, my true family. The ones who had seen me at my lowest and still believed in me, still stood by my side. And as for Dennis and Joan, their downfall was inevitable, a consequence of their own selfish actions and misguided priorities. They had lost far more than just their reputations. They had lost the respect and loyalty of those who had once looked up to them. But I had gained something far more precious, my freedom, my self-respect, and the knowledge that I was truly loved and supported by those who mattered most. As I stepped down from the podium, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. replaced by a newfound sense of purpose and determination. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive, unburdened by the chains of manipulation and deceit that had held me captive for far too long. This was my moment, my chance to start anew and rebuild my life on my own terms. And as I looked towards the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and possibility. After all, the best revenge is living well, and that's exactly what I intended to do. The aftermath of my public confrontation with Dennis and Joan was both exhilarating and exhausting. As I stepped out into the crisp evening air, I could feel the weight of years of pent-up anger and resentment finally lifting from my shoulders. "Maggie, over here!" I turned to see Beth waving me over, a broad grin splitting her face. She enveloped me in a fierce hug, her eyes shining with pride. "You were incredible in there," she said, giving my arm a gentle squeeze. "I've never seen you so strong, so confident." A small smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. "I'll admit, it felt pretty damn good to finally stand up to those two." Beth nodded emphatically. "You have no idea how long I've been waiting for you to see them for who they really are. That mother-son duo has been nothing but trouble from the start." Her words rang true, and I felt a pang of regret for all the years I had spent making excuses for their behavior, turning a blind eye to the toxicity that had slowly poisoned my life. "Well, no more," I said firmly. "That chapter of my life is over. It's time for me to start fresh, to rebuild on my own terms." Beth beamed at me, her expression a mixture of admiration and relief. "I'm so proud of you, Maggie. You've come such a long way from the woman who used to let Joan walk all over her." I nodded, my mind drifting back to those dark days when Joan's constant belittling had left me feeling small and insignificant. But now, in the wake of my public triumph, I felt a newfound sense of strength and self-worth. "I've learned that true family stands by you, not controls you," I said, squeezing Beth's hand gratefully, "and I'll never let anyone walk over me again." As the weeks passed, I found myself reconnecting with old friends and family members who had rallied to my side during my darkest hours. Their support and encouragement buoyed me, reminding me that I was far from alone in this new chapter of my life. And as for Dennis and Joan, well, let's just say the aftermath of their exposed misdeeds was far from pretty. The once revered family name had been dragged through the mud, their reputations in tatters. I would catch glimpses of them around town, their expressions sullen and defeated, as if the weight of their own actions had finally caught up to them. But I refused to let their downfall consume me. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life, one piece at a time. I reclaimed my cherished belongings from storage, carefully restoring the warmth and familiarity to the house that had once been my home. And slowly, steadily, I began to heal. Not just from the betrayal, but from years of emotional abuse and manipulation. It wasn't an easy journey, of course. There were moments when the pain and anger threatened to overwhelm me, when the temptation to wallow in bitterness was almost too strong to resist. But each time I would remind myself of how far I had come, of the strength and resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times. And as the months passed, something remarkable began to happen. The whispers and sideways glances that had once followed me gradually faded, replaced by nods of respect and admiration. It seemed that my public stand against Dennis and Joan had struck a chord with others who had suffered in silence, and my story had become a beacon of hope for those trapped in their own toxic situations. "It's good to see you back, Maggie," an old acquaintance remarked one day as I passed her in the grocery store. "Stronger than ever." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude. "Thank you. It hasn't been easy, but I've learned that true strength comes from within, and from surrounding yourself with people who truly care about you." As I made my way home, my arms laden with bags of fresh produce and the promise of a new recipe to try, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I had come. The woman I was today was a far cry from the meek, downtrodden soul who had once allowed herself to be defined by the cruelty of others. No, I was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had reclaimed her power and her sense of self-worth. And as I looked towards the future, I felt a sense of excitement and possibility that had been absent for far too long. This was my life, my story, and I was the author of my own destiny. The road ahead might be long and winding, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive, unburdened by the weight of others' expectations and manipulations. As I stepped through the front door and into the warm embrace of my newly reclaimed home, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. The first chapter in a story that promised to be filled with adventure, growth, and the kind of hard-won wisdom that can only come from surviving the darkest of storms. And I couldn't wait to see what the future had in store.